Chapter 1421. Although Jinka had already taken Lung Ming as his disciple, he still needed to determine whether Wang Wan's spirit sword was Lung Ming's through this actual combat. He needed to know how much Lung Ming had grown after 2 days of special combat training. This sword Dao competition was a good opportunity to test Lung Ming's learning efficiency. For him, learning ability was the key. After all, to find a spirit sword suitable for little girl Wan's nanny, he had to be proficient in everything, and Lung Ming still had a lot to learn. The bronze group competition was about to begin. At the very front of the audience area at the old swordplay field was a spectator stand made entirely of crystal for the judges. 9 Nether, the sweet-talking Yuling, the sweet-talking Mou, and little Qian. The 4 judges of this sword Dao competition were all sitting in this crystal room. The bronze group competition is about to begin. I wonder how that little guy is doing, Yuling said. She crossed her slender legs, and her pink high pants Cheongsam fell to the ground along her long legs, attracting the attention of many sword spirits in the audience area. White. Idiot. Those are safety pants. You're the idiots. How can you disrespect Lady Yuling? Move your filthy eyes away. In the Sword King world, Yuling had always been very popular, which was to be expected. Mou also had a lot of fans, but because she was too active, she often showed her face in front of outsiders. Compared with Yuling, she seemed a little less mysterious. Ignoring the discussion in the audience area, 9 Nether also looked forward to the bronze group competition. I heard that Lord Jinka personally gave Lung Ming special training. What kind of special training? Mou asked curiously, the jade corolla on her head giving off a beautiful light. It seems to be mixed doubles. Lord Jinka and Lady Bai Qiao together, 9 Nether answered. F***K, isn't that domestic violence? Mou immediately felt sorry for Lung Ming. It was repaired after the fight. To prevent Lung Ming from being traumatized, I heard that Lady Bai Qiao erased his memory of the special training. Erased it? Then what's the point? Because he doesn't need to use his brain to remember it. Later in the battle, Lung Ming might just show muscle memory. Yuling and Mou were both shocked. Just how many times did he get beaten up to form muscle memory? Very soon, the sound of gongs and drums reverberated throughout the entire sword battle arena. The 200 sword spirits from the bronze group entered the arena. The 4 entrances to the sword battle arena were opened at the same time. At each entrance, 50 sword spirits were led into the arena by the Imperial Sword Guards in an orderly manner. They were arranged into 4 rows, forming a square formation. Lung Ming was in the group that came out from the eastern entrance. He was extremely small, but he stood at the very front. He looked like a tiny dot. In the spectator seats, many sword spirits were discussing this matter. This is the sword master's new disciple? It looks very ordinary to me. It reached the top of the sword steel with its extremely high talent value, but it has only been a few days since it was born. How strong can its actual combat strength be? Although the news that Jinka had accepted Lung Ming as a disciple had already spread like wildfire throughout the Sword King world, doubts were inevitable. No one doubted Lung Ming's talent. After all, the numbers on the sword steel could not be fake. But it had actually been less than 2 days since Jinka had accepted Lung Ming as a disciple to the start of the Sword Dao competition. Rounding up the number of hours, it hadn't even been 2 days. In such a short period of time, how much could a newly born sword spirit grow? Many people would draw a question mark on it. Facing the sea of people around the sword battle arena, and listening to the doubts in the air, Lotus Sun frowned slightly. In the heavenly room, Lotus Sun frowned slightly. She was worried about Lung Ming. She had wanted to take advantage of the Sword Dao competition to look for a sword spirit for Wang Nuan during the competition, but the atmosphere now was really too tense. She couldn't help feeling her heart in her throat. After all, it's such a grand Sword Dao competition. Just looking at it makes one's heart pound. It's normal for Miss Sun to feel emotional. Wu Jing comforted her on the side. Rongrong's nervous reaction is so cute. Sun Yinger giggled on the side. Do you feel like you're waiting for your child's report card to come out? Lotus Sun was startled. Needless to say, Sun Yinger's words were spot on. It would have been better if she hadn't said it. Now that she said it, it did seem like a little. This was clearly her first time meeting Lung Ming, but she didn't know why she felt so worried for him. Maybe it was because he was Jinka's disciple. Since he had been accepted as Jinka's disciple, did student Wang Ling also have high hopes for Lung Ming? Little guy, you must do your best. Lotus Sun clenched her fists as she silently cheered Lung Ming on in her heart. Kiki. Sun Yinger gave a meaningful smile on the side. She hadn't paid much attention to the competition, and her gaze had been fixed on Lotus Sun the entire time. In comparison, the girl's interesting reaction was much more exciting than the competition. Imagine her family's Rongrong taking care of a child 10 years from now. Then, she would take her child to the parent-teacher conference and wait for that final report card. Perhaps she would be very nervous, right? Sun Yinger shook her head quickly as her imagination ran wild. She felt that she was thinking too much. What child? How could she have imagined the problem of having a child? And even if she had a child, who would it be with was also a problem. Wang Ying? That abominable gorilla. She would jump down from here and starve to death. And she would never agree to be with this guy. Boom. At that moment, the image in the magic ball was accompanied by a blazing explosion in the center of the sword battle arena. While Sun Yinger's imagination was running wild, the bronze group's free-for-all had already begun. To everyone's surprise, they had thought that this free-for-all would be a battle royale. In the end, the moment Nine Nether announced the start of the competition, except for Lung Ming, all the bronze group spirit swords turned into sword light and soared into the sky. Their movements were synchronized, and their targets were astonishingly synchronized. A total of 199 sword lights of different colors charged at Lung Ming. When these sword lights collided, there was a huge explosion. 2 spirit swords, one ice and one fire, broke through the thick smoke. They were the famous Ice and Fire brothers of the bronze group, and had been chosen to participate in this free-for-all according to their ranking. They were ranked 2nd and 3rd on the bronze group's sword steel, only after Lung Ming. After Lung Ming's sword steel results came out, the 2 brothers had been looking for an opportunity to teach Lung Ming a lesson. But as soon as the competition started, they couldn't help it. What they didn't expect even more was that the other sword spirits in this competition were unexpectedly thinking the same thing as them. And they all attacked Lung Ming as soon as the competition started. Even if you're Lord Jinka's disciple, what can you do against this kind of attack? The Ice and Fire brothers sneered in their hearts. At that moment, an emerald green sword light soared into the sky. Powerful sword chi tore through the thick smoke. A boy in rattan armor expressionlessly patted the dust off his face and slowly walked out of the billowing smoke. He was completely unscathed, and there wasn't even a speck of dust on his face. This was the result of his special training after being hit by Jinka and by Qiao's mixed doubles. Lung Ming was just a blade of grass, but now this blade of grass was very hard. Chapter 1422. The scale of the Sword Dao meet was unprecedented, and even the bronze group competition was exciting. Lung Ming was besieged at the beginning, and there were many cheers in the venue. However, to everyone's surprise, when the thick smoke dissipated, the boy in rattan armor walked out unscathed. His entire body was emitting a green light, and the aura of the laws of nature. Lung Ming could no longer remember his memories of the special training, and he only knew that he had been beaten up by his master and his wife during the special training, and his sword body had been repaired after being shattered countless times. It must be because of the special training. At this moment, Lung Ming thought to himself. It was because when the attacks of the bronze group contestants landed on him, he didn't feel any pain at all. It was just like a mosquito bite. Due to the fact that Lung Ming was besieged at the beginning, all the sword spirits attacked him, and the 199 sword chi gathered at one point to form a huge explosion. Lung Ming did not feel any pain or itch. However, the explosion had already caused many sword spirits to be affected. More than half of the contestants were eliminated at once. Hence, including Lung Ming, there were less than 100 sword spirits left on the field, and most of them were injured. The explosion of the bronze group sword chi was also extremely powerful. That was the terrifying thing about the sword spirits born in the Sword King realm. Even if they were bronze group sword spirits, they would still be able to achieve great things on Earth. After the first round of testing, Everyone present knew very well that the final opponent this blade of grass would face was the Ice and Fire brothers in the void. The two brothers were very strong, and if they joined forces, they would have the strength to fight the Silver Group Sword Spirits. Twin Sword Spirits were very rare in the Sword King realm, and the Ice and Fire brothers had not been nurtured for too long in the Sword King realm. Given time, they might be able to be ranked in the Diamond Group. How can a blade of grass be so tough? But that's it, I was just testing it just now. In the void, the Ice and Fire brothers crossed their arms and stared at Lung Ming condescendingly. The two brothers had long predicted that Lung Ming might have received special training from the Sword King before the start of the competition, so he wouldn't be defeated so easily. However, in fact, that was exactly what the two brothers wanted. It would be boring if he was defeated too easily. The current Lung Ming had been personally trained by the Sword King. If they could defeat Lung Ming in such a situation, then the two of them would definitely become famous through this battle. He might even gain Lord Sword King's favor and appreciation. At this moment, Lung Ming looked into the void. The pressure that the Ice and Fire brothers gave him was not as great as he had imagined. The pressure on him actually came mostly from Wang Ling, Jinka and Bai Qiao. Lung Ming was very clearly aware that these three people were watching his battle as well. Because of this, he didn't want to lose face. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, the nearby injured sword spirits that had yet to be eliminated suddenly soared into the sky again. They had a tacit understanding and actually formed a sword formation on the spot. Heavenly Sun Sword Formation. Get rid of him first. Someone shouted. They formed a circle in the sky, shining like the sun. In the center of the Heavenly Sun Sword Formation, the sword chi interweaved together, constantly fusing together. Then, it gave birth to a kind of sword chi that surged with powerful energy. It only took a few seconds. A beam of golden light fell from the sky like a huge sword and struck Lung Ming's face. This fusion sword chi was very strong. If Lung Ming hadn't gone through special training, he would have collapsed on the spot. But now things were different. The combined sword chi caused Lung Ming's rattan armor to smoke. Don't get in the way. Lung Ming didn't even bother to raise his head. He didn't care at all. With a light flick, a wisp of emerald green sword chi flowed out from between his fingers. This wisp of emerald green sword chi was very calm, and didn't have the slightest murderous intent. However, when it entered the combined sword chi in the sky, it suddenly exploded with a loud bang. As a mushroom cloud rose in the air, the sword spirits that had formed the sword formation were instantly blown to pieces and scurried around the entire sword battle arena like jumping eggs. After dealing with these sword spirits, Lung Ming turned to face his two opponents. The Ice and Fire brothers were also observing the battle, and were astonished by the results of Lung Ming's special training. This increase in battle strength was indeed too rapid. Brother! At that moment, Ice Sword turned to look at Fireman on the side. Looks like we can only cripple him. Fire Sword's thoughts coincided with Ice Sword's. They wanted to win Jinka's favor through this battle, but Lung Ming's rapid progress made them feel pressured. Even if they beat Lung Ming's talent was still there. As long as his talent was there, it was only a matter of time before he surpassed them. But if they crippled this kid in front of them in the competition, Lord Sword King might have no other choice. In the judges' seats, inside the Crystal House, Yuling frowned slightly. She could feel that the Ice and Fire brothers were already accumulating strength. Furthermore, very strong killing intent. It looks like these two brothers have already decided to kill Lung Ming. It wasn't just Yuling. You also felt it. Lord Sword King is also watching this battle. This is to attract Lord Sword King's attention, Nine Nether said. It could only be said that as the representative of Sword King World, he instantly understood what the two brothers were thinking. These two brothers seemed to have a sure kill combination. What's it called? Mou lowered her head and pondered. It's the Ice and Fire blades, Little Qian replied. With sword chi all over their bodies, they charge at the opponent from the left and right at high speed. One uses the left leg and the other the right leg, and the two legs spin in a pincer attack, using the strength of the legs to crush the opponent's head. Hey, can the little guy handle it? Mou was worried. At the same time, the jade crown on her head changed color to a melancholy dark blue. This color-changing jade crown reflected Mo's current mood. If she wasn't emotional, it would be white. I don't think you need to worry too much. Nine Nether smiled. Although he didn't know what on earth the 2 days of special training had been about. But judging from Lung Ming's reaction in the face of the Heavenly Sun Sword formation, it was likely that Jinka and Bai Qiao had already demonstrated all their combination techniques in front of Lung Ming in the last 2 days. In the next moment, the Ice and Fire Brothers combination technique, Ice and Fire Blades, was already upon him. He was sure that the Ice and Fire Brothers' next attack would definitely be a concentrated attack on him. Although Lung Ming couldn't remember where he had seen this scene before, he somehow felt like he had seen it before. His body reacted almost uncontrollably from muscle memory. When the brothers' ice leg and hem approached his head, he grabbed them with one hand and pinched their ankles. Lung Ming's body was light as he formed a spiral on the spot, as if he was dancing as he played with the Ice and Fire Brothers in the palm of his hand. This was the kind of strength that could overcome strength with softness. After spinning for a few seconds, the Ice and Fire Brothers were thrown away. When everyone came back to their senses, a Tai Chi disc had formed under Lung Ming's feet. This was a technique that used the brothers' strength to leverage on each other. Lung Ming didn't know how he had done it, but his body had moved involuntarily. After the counterattack was over, the Ice and Fire Brothers were huddled together in the sword battle arena, their clothes in tatters and their faces bruised and swollen. There was fear in their eyes as they stomped their feet and retreated continuously, mumbling in a panic. Who used Tai Chi? After a few seconds of silence, the entire sword battle arena burst into fiery cheers. It was true that the audience had always been fence-sitters. And this was the scariest thing about champion fans. Lung Ming heaved a long sigh of relief. He felt that he didn't embarrass his master. At this moment, in the depths of the infinite Milky Way, a layer outside the Milky Way. Through the endless stars, a pair of turbid evil eyes opened. I've found the most suitable sacrifice. A moment later, a young voice was heard. Sir, you finally can't hold it in anymore? This voice came from a young man surrounded by stars. His figure was blurry, and only a faint outline could be seen under a trace of starlight. As he spoke, the surrounding stars collided and exploded. The two of them used the universe as a chessboard and the stars in their hands as chess pieces to play. I've waited for a long time for the Heaven Tomb grass to take form. And now the time is ripe. The owner of the turbid I said calmly, when the old Rubik's Cube is assembled, that group of people will die. People have to pay the price for their foolishness. But that young man is not easy to deal with. Even I can't see his background. The young man surrounded by stars frowned slightly. I will fully understand him before the battle. I have already set up chess pieces in the Sword King realm. At this moment, the owner of the turbid I said coldly. Chapter 1423. Lung Ming's victory in this battle was within expectations. Next was the showdown between the King group. Because this was the finale, there were also the showdowns between the Silver, Gold and Diamond groups, including the time needed to clean up the competition venue. Sun Yinger estimated that it would take at least 2 to 3 hours for Lotus Sun to go on stage. Since she was bored, of course she had to have some fun. Sun Yinger's eyes darted around as she thought of a good way to tease Lotus Sunday Rong. I don't know if you've sensed it, she said cautiously in Lotus Sun's ear. Her face burned and she got goosebumps all over. Inge, what are you doing? You haven't noticed yet? Sun Yinger whispered in her ear. Ling Zhenren is in Sky Room 2 next door. In fact, Sun Yinger hadn't actually sensed Wang Ling's aura at all, but she could sense Wang Ying. It wasn't that Wang Ying had leaked her aura. It was just that after being trained by Wang Ying for a long time, Sun Yinger had developed a habitual muscle reflex. This was because Wang Ying, the gorilla, often grabbed her wrist and banged it against the wall. As a result, Sun Yinger's wrist was now like a radar device used to detect Wang Ying's movements. As long as she was close to Wang Ying, her wrist would feel like it was being clamped down. Furthermore, the closer he was, the stronger the feeling of his wrist being bound became. During the showdown between the bronze group, Sun Yinger walked back and forth in the room tentatively, and finally found the source of the signal. She confirmed that Wang Ying was next door. Since Wang Ying was next door, It was obvious that Wang Ling was here as well. Classmate Wang Ling is here too? After hearing this news, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on Lotus Sun's face. She knew very well that given Wang Ling's personality, there was a high chance that he would choose to watch the match from home. But he had actually come to watch the match live. For her, this was definitely an extra surprise. She didn't know why, but the young girl suddenly felt that her mood was very good. Her previous nervousness was instantly swept away, and she didn't feel nervous at all. Wang Ling's presence, she felt very at ease. Rong, aren't you going to greet them next door? Sun Yinger chuckled and began to encourage the girl to take action. I haven't thought of what to say yet. Lotus Sun blushed and started to heat up again. Besides, classmate Wang Ling is clearly next door. If he doesn't come over, it's because he doesn't want to interfere with my competition, right? If I go, will I disturb him? It's okay. Just tell me what you want to say. I can help you pass the message. There's no need to go there. Sun Yinger's expression was somewhat treacherous. Or the human mouthpiece activate. Is this okay? After saying that, Lotus Sun glanced at Wu Jin and Old Barbarian. They were watching the competition in Lotus Sun's heavenly room. It wasn't that he was purposely refusing to leave. In fact, it was Nine Nether who had asked them to stay here. On one hand, he could better commentate on the match, and on the other he could act as her bodyguard. It had to be said that both Wu Jin and Old Barbarian were sensible people. When they heard Lotus Sun's words, they consciously covered their ears with their hands. Do not listen to indecent things. They would not meddle in the affairs of the young couple. Besides, it was no good for them to know too much. Apart from that, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian also felt that this was the best way to prevent the dog food from exploding. Lotus Sun hesitated for a moment, then turned to Sun Yinger and said, "Then just help me say hello." "No. That's too simple. Don't you have anything in particular you want to ask?" Sun Yinger rubbed her chin and said, "For example, the Rubik's Cube task? Rong, didn't you say before that you were worried that something bad would happen if the collection process went too smoothly?" "That's right, but I can't tell what's wrong, it's just a sixth sense." The girl looked troubled. Also, classmate Wang Ling won't feel comfortable asking too many questions at once. Then ask a simple question. For example, what do you think of Jiang Yingying? It's best if you can write an essay of at least 800 words. What are you thinking about, Ing? Lotus Sun smiled bitterly. Classmate Wang Ling probably only knows 6 points in his essay. That's true. Sun Yinger nodded. Then how about this? Help me say hello first, and then help me ask classmate Wang Ling. I want to invite him to Old Street this weekend and ask him if he's free. Lotus Sun mustered up her courage and said to Sun Yinger. Sometimes opportunities were in one's own hands. She had to take the initiative. Okay. Sun Yinger nodded. Lotus Sun added, "Tell classmate Wang Ling that it's just the two of us. It won't be like the last time when we went to the Xiao family compound, with a bunch of people following us." The main thing was that Lotus Sun didn't need to worry about her safety now. If they ran into a killer organization like Shadowstream that had been hired by a competitor of Huagua Water Curtain Group, she could handle it on her own. No problem. Then Sun Yinger agreed and turned into a shadow, slipping out. But the truth was that she didn't dare enter Wang Ling's room. She just pretended to pace back and forth at the door, and then made up an answer. Sun Yinger quickly returned to Lotus Sun's side. I asked him. Ling Jinren said he can go. He's free." "Really?" Lotus Sun's eyes lit up. Sun Yinger had never seen the girl so happy, and for a moment, she suddenly felt a little guilty. Really? Knowing her, didn't you ask at all?" Fortunately, Lotus Sun quickly noticed that something wasn't right with Sun Yinger's expression. In any case, this wasn't the first time this girl had been naughty. Given her understanding of Sun Yinger, it was very likely that Sun Yinger had made up an answer herself. If she had really asked, how could she have come back so quickly? Lotus Sun stroked Sun Yinger's head with a very gentle expression on her face. "Inger, since you asked, ask nicely. I won't blame you." Sun Yinger was silent for a while, then pursed her lips and said weakly, "Then, I'll really go. If I'm turned down, don't blame me." I won't blame you. Lotus Sun nodded. Okay. Sun Yinger realized that she had only wanted to tease Lotus Sun, but now it seemed that she had trapped herself. This was a hole she had dug herself, and even if she had to hold back her tears, she had to jump in. She was so nervous that she paced back and forth in front of sky number 2. The feeling of her wrists being bound grew stronger. After struggling for a few minutes, Sun Yinger gritted her teeth. Forget it. For Rongrong's happiness, I'll throw caution to the wind. She was just about to turn into a shadow and enter the room. The next moment, she was lifted up by a force. When Sun Yinger came back to her senses, she saw Wang Ying grab her wrist and push her against the wooden wall of the inn. What do you want now? Wang Ying looked at her with a slightly playful expression. Lord Ling is watching the competition. No one is allowed to disturb him. Sun Yinger's eyes glistened with tears. I just wanted to ask. You're not allowed. Wang Ying coldly said these 2 words. Sun Yinger was annoyed. Why do you have to control me wherever you go? What if I had to ask? I said you're not allowed. Wang Ying still maintained her attitude. Then I'll shout. Ling Zhenren will definitely hear me. Sun Yinger resisted with renewed vigor. You can try. Wang Ying sneered. I'll try. Sun Yinger snorted. She was about to speak. But in the next moment, she suddenly felt that Wang Ying's breath was suddenly closing in on her, using 2 domineering lips to swiftly seal her mouth. Chapter 1424. Wang Ling was very satisfied with Lung Ming's performance in the first battle. Although Lung Ming's learning ability couldn't catch up with Wang Ling's, he had passed. According to the 100-point system, the normal passing line was 60 points. But in Wang Ling's heart, 95 was a passing mark. 96 to 98 was average. 99 to 100 was outstanding. Wang Ling's preliminary assessment of Lung Ming's learning ability was 95. That was enough. Because Lung Ming was still young, there was still room for him to grow. At that moment, Wang Ying turned into a black shadow and slipped through the crack in the door. Then, visible to the naked eye, the black shadow gradually took on a human form and coalesced into Wang Ying's triumphant face. He whistled with a satisfied expression on his face. It would be perfect if he had a cigarette at a time like this. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. Shadow Dao was really a miraculous thing. It was clearly a power born in his body, but its personality was too different from his own. When Wang Ling had seen Wang Ying gagging Sun Yinger at the door just now, his mind had instantly gone blank. His first reaction was, isn't Wang Ying afraid that I'll suck out Sun Yinger's tongue? But in any case, the scene in front of him was still beyond Wang Ling's understanding. Shadows actually had no actual age. In theory, they weren't people. But Wang Ling's and Lotus Sun's shadows could mix. This was something Wang Ling hadn't expected. Don't worry, Ling Master, I've already planted a seed in him, Wang Ying said at that moment. Wang Ling knew what this seed referred to. But for some reason, when these words came out of Wang Ying's mouth, they sounded different. This was a defense seed that could be triggered in a moment of crisis. It was Wang Ling who had ordered Wang Ying to set it up. Generally speaking, you just needed to carve the defense seed's magic seal on your palm, and then lightly pat it like a stamp. Who knew that Wang Ying would directly choose to gaggle Sun Yinger? Such a method could be said to be ingenious. Sword Master is here. What are you worried about? To be honest, Jinka himself was very surprised that Wang Ling was personally standing guard at Sword King World this time. Naturally, Wang Ling had his reasons for being here in person. Wang Ling had predicted yesterday that there would be unforeseen events at the Sword Dao conference. There's an enemy attack. Wang Ying answered Jinka's question. Also, the other party is from outside the Milky Way. Infinite Galaxy? Jinka instantly thought of this mysterious universe. The vastness of the endless Milky Way was far beyond the reach of the outer realm Milky Way. Back then, in search of Drought Star, immortal Zhen Yuan had roamed the Milky Way outside the Milky Way for 1,000 years, but hadn't been able to finish it. If he went to the endless Milky Way, with his immortal venerable realm, he might not be able to reach the end even if he walked for 1 billion years. What's your goal? Jinka asked again. This was the first time in history that an enemy from the infinite galaxy had appeared. It was precisely because he didn't understand the enemy that he felt uneasy. If it wasn't for the power of deduction which had given him this new term, he really wouldn't have known that there was actually another layer beyond the Milky Way. Was it really a cosmic nesting doll? He didn't know much about the infinite galaxy, and he didn't know what level the enemies from there were at. What if the other party was stronger than him? Wang Ling knew he was very strong. However, he had always understood the principle that there was always a higher mountain. Because of this, he had always been humble. He might turn the 6 great heavenly Daos into gems, and embed them into a glove to snap his fingers. The universe will be destroyed. Wang Ying said with a horrified expression. Jinka was horrified, and almost took it seriously. Just as he was about to ask a question, Wang Ying continued. He's probably here for Lung Ming. Lung Ming, is that so? Jinka nodded to himself. This was a more reasonable answer. Lung Ming was transformed from heavenly tomb grass. What kind of place was the heavenly tomb? Rumor had it that it was a cosmic tomb that Tao ancestor Wang had built for himself. Buried in this tomb were all the treasures that Tao ancestor Wang had accumulated throughout his life. He clearly wasn't dead, but wanted to build a tomb for himself first. This was the standard thinking of a big shot. Rumor had it that Tao ancestor Wang had built the heavenly tomb when he was middle-aged. He had thought that his time was coming, so he had built the tomb ahead of time. In the end, even Tao ancestor Wang himself hadn't expected that he could be reincarnated. This had directly led to this heavenly tomb that he had built, and to this day, no one had moved in. The location of the heavenly tomb is very vague, and we don't know its exact location yet. It could be outside the Milky Way, or it could be in the infinite galaxy. Wang Ying said. Lung Ming was transformed from heavenly tomb grass. When Tao ancestor Wang came to Sword King world back then, it was a withered grass that stuck to the soles of his feet. Who would have thought that after the baptism of time, the withered grass would come to life again, and in the end, it would successfully give birth to Lung Ming in Sword King world. At this point, Jinka actually already had a general idea. This enemy from the infinite galaxy was looking for Lung Ming, and their ultimate goal was the heavenly tomb, in order to obtain Tao ancestor Wang's treasure. So the reason why you came here in person is because, you're right. Wang Ying knew what Jinka was thinking, and a solemn expression appeared on his face. My thoughts on this point are the same as Lord Jinka's. We've never come into contact with an enemy from the infinite galaxy before. If we underestimate them, we might cause an unimaginable disaster. The first match is Lung Ming's. The people from the infinite galaxy haven't made a move yet. Commander feels that the other party will most likely show up when Miss Sun goes on stage, so he had me set up defensive seeds in advance. That is to say, this time, Commander and I will do our best to deal with this enemy from the outer realm, Wang Ying said. Oh. Jinka was silent 3 times. Looking at this situation, he felt that he might witness history. If they went all out, didn't that mean that the Tao talisman seal would be completely removed? Of course, Jinka also felt. Wang Ling and Wang Ying. He was thinking too much. His understanding of the infinite galaxy was limited. But Jinka felt that he still had some understanding of Wang Ling. No matter what the background of this enemy from the infinite galaxy was, even if you didn't remove the talisman seal, the other party would still die. Wang Ling. This was the man whom Wang Ling had fallen in love with at first glance. Jinka felt that he had good taste. Elsewhere, in Lotus Sun's heavenly room, as Wang Ying had expected, Sun Yinger had completely shut herself off. Don't crying. President Ying probably didn't do it on purpose. Lotus Sun tried to comfort her. You're still speaking up for him. Sun Yinger cried even harder. She touched her belly and tried to calm down. If he kissed me, then so be it. Why did he blow air into my mouth? Lotus Sun stared at Sun Yinger's big belly and really didn't know what to say. She had actually been kissed by President Ying. For some reason, Lotus Sun felt a little sour in her mouth. Chapter 1425. At the same time that the Sword Dao meet was being held in the Sword King realm, the core members of the Battle Sect's perfected Venerate Hall were also watching the grand competition through remote surveillance. Tyrant was meditating at the front. He used the symbol to penetrate his ocular power into the blade storm of the Sword King realm, and saw the battle that was happening inside. Then the images were transmitted back through the eye power. Then it was projected by the ring scar on the monk's head, forming a projection in the void. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal exclaimed in his heart at this scene. As expected of Senior Golden Lamp, besides emitting smoke to cook hot pot, this ring scar actually has this function. It's just some insignificant tricks. Tyrant smiled modestly as usual. He was also paying special attention to the Sword Dao meet, but his focus was not on Lotus Sunday. At the Sword Dao meet, in the monk's eyes, it was a foregone conclusion that the girl would win the championship. And the key point was still the unknown enemy from the infinite galaxy. When Wang Ling had deduced this last night, all the core members of Battle Sect had already known about it. Of course, Lotus Sun didn't know that. That was Tyrant's suggestion so that she could be at ease and focus on the match before her. As for the matter of protecting Earth, it would be left to this group of men to handle. Now that Wang Ling was in Sword King world, the monk was Earth's last line of defense. Although the ultimate goal of the unknown opponent from the endless Milky Way was the Sword King realm, they still had to be on guard. What's Infinite Galaxy's opponent like? Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal asked. After getting to know Wang Ling, he realized that all the cultivation knowledge he had accumulated was of no use at all. Because of Wang Ling, he had gotten to know even more almighty seniors who were hiding among the cultivators. Because of Wang Ling, his understanding of the map view had also been completely expanded. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal suddenly realized that he had a lot of blind spots in his knowledge. And Wang Ling played the role of constantly breaking through his blind spots. Not only did it allow him to come into contact with a higher level of knowledge, but it also allowed him to rub his current understanding of cultivation knowledge against the ground. The infinite galaxy is too far away, so this penniless monk doesn't go there often. Every time before we go, we have to prepare a large amount of resources in advance in case of emergency, said the monk. He pinched his fingers together and calculated. If he were to travel to the infinite Milky Way, it would take about half a year. Wang Ling aside, given his realm, it would take him half a year. It was impossible for anyone else to get there without the help of external forces. Rumor has it that the heavenly tomb that Dao ancestor Wang established is in this boundless galaxy. This penniless monk went there more than 76,000 times. Hearing this, everyone's mouth twitched. He had been there more than 76,000 times. And the monk actually called this not much? However, with Tyrant's experience of nearly 4,000 reincarnations, perhaps the number of trips to the infinite galaxy was not that rare. The infinite Milky Way is too vast. Even a small space there is bigger than the Milky Way. The monk lamented. Although this poor monk has worked many times, the exploration rate of the infinite galaxy is less than 0.1%. Senior, did you not discover any signs of living beings? At least, I haven't found anything in the many times I've explored. The monk said. Because of this poor monk was also very surprised when Ling Jinren suddenly said that there was an unknown opponent from the infinite galaxy. So we can only wait now? Ling Jinren and I originally deduced that their target was Lung Ming. But Lung Ming's battle is already over, and the other party still hasn't made a move. Is it for Miss Lotus Sun? Or rather, both Lung Ming and Miss Sun are targets. The monk lowered his eyes and said thoughtfully, let's watch them make a move. After they fight, we'll know their true combat strength. Saying that, everyone turned their attention back to the Sword Dao competition. The competition for the King's group was about to begin. Lotus Sun, the #1 foundation establishment cultivator on Earth, was about to take the stage. When she walked into the periphery of the sword arena, the ruckus in the arena reverberated in her ears. Her expression, however, was much calmer than she had imagined. The strands of sword chi that flowed through the surroundings were all probing her cultivation. Many sword spirits had question marks on their faces. Human? Why can a human at the foundation establishment stage also participate in the Sword Dao competition? Haven't you noticed yet? This human has become one with her sword. A sword spirit with outstanding eyesight explained. Lotus Sun's passive version of becoming one with her sword made her, and the spirit sword indistinguishable. Although her realm was still at the foundation establishment realm, The overall increase in combat strength was very considerable. The 50 people at the east entrance, please line up in an orderly manner, we're ready to enter, said a royal sword guard at the front of the line. Lotus Sun was at the end of the line at the east entrance. In the past, Lotus Sun would definitely be the first to be in the limelight. But now, she had indeed changed a lot. On the other hand, that was also Lotus Sun's own thoughts. After all, the Sword King realm was the world of sword spirits, and it did not seem reasonable for a human like her to participate in the Sword Dao competition. Long before the start of the competition, everyone had been quite critical of the humans' participation in the Sword Dao competition. Although Mysterious Sea had a high ranking on the Sword Dao ranking, many sword spirits didn't like him, even though he had made a comeback due to his hybrid quality. This time, Lotus Sun chose to participate in the Sword Dao competition because she wanted to win the Sword God alloy, and choose a suitable sword spirit for Anwan. On the other hand, it was also for Mysterious Sea's sake. The Sword King realm was Mysterious Sea's hometown. Lotus Sun didn't want Mysterious Sea to still be looked down upon and discriminated against after returning to his hometown. She wanted to bring Mysterious Sea along and tell all the sword spirits in the Sword King realm that Mysterious Sea was not a useless inferior spirit sword. Even if he came from a poor background, he could still make a comeback. Even if he was lucky, so what? Luck was also a part of one's strength. When the gate of the east entrance slowly opened, Lotus Sun was wearing a dark blue Taoist dress and holding Mysterious Sea with her head held high. This Taoist dress was the +0 world-defying Taoist dress that Awan had given her previously, and it had now become her combat suit. She followed at the back of the line and walked out against the light. With the appearance of the only human girl, the sword arena was in an uproar again. Although there were many sword spirits watching, not many of them had actually seen Lotus Sun before. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the girl received all kinds of scorching gazes, and she began to feel the pressure that Lung Ming was carrying before the start of the competition. Interesting, a human girl actually brought her inferior sword to participate in the competition. She really dared to come. She's quite cute. She's my type. But does anyone know why that inferior sword in her hand is ranked 7th on the sword rankings? Who knows? Maybe it's just because her skin looks better? Up until now, the rhythm of Lotus Sun's participation in the competition had never stopped in the Sword King realm. In fact, even Nine Nether hadn't expected the sword spirits of the Sword King realm to be so exclusive. Girl, aren't you going to release your sword chi? Let us see how powerful this inferior sword ranked 7th on the sword rankings is. A meddlesome sword spirit shouted loudly in the spectator stands, immediately causing another storm. Lotus Sun closed her eyes slightly and took a deep breath, doing her best to calm herself down. Then, she used her slender and fair fingers to touch the scabbard and drew the sword inch by inch in the face of the clamor around her. As you wish. The next moment, the girl opened her beautiful eyes. But she had only drawn out less than 3 centimeters of the sword when Mysterious Sea's sword chi, like a raging sea, surged out from the gap and swept through the field like a tsunami. In the field, all the sword spirits were horrified. This powerful sword chi overflowed and surged in the field, causing illusions to appear in their eyes. The sword battle arena in front of them had suddenly turned into a vast ocean right before their eyes. And in the sea, everywhere was water. Chapter 14:26. Lotus Sun's current strength was incomparable to before. When this aura was released, the hem of her skirt billowed along with the sword chi. The blue skirt billowed like ocean waves. The sword spirits in the stands were all horrified by this powerful sword chi. They couldn't imagine that an inferior spirit sword could burst forth with such power. Most people were frightened by this sword chi, but on such an occasion, it was inevitable that some old gentleman would appear. Go up a little more. Yes, we're almost there. Some sword spirits stared at the girl's blue skirt, wanting to catch a glimpse of the scenery below. Earlier, they had deliberately followed the crowd to provoke Lotus Sunday. Their goal was to provoke this human girl's anger, because sword chi basically went up from below. Once it erupted, it was very easy for it to be exposed. However, The result was a huge disappointment to the old gentleman among the sword spirits. Because just as the hem of her skirt was about to be blown up, the anti-gravity mode of Lotus Sun's skirt had been activated. It could only be said that this was the skirt Awan had given her. Anti-gravity mode was very practical for every girl. In the arena, the anti-gravity blue skirt swayed wildly, but didn't get blown up. Lotus Sun slowly pulled Mysterious C's sword out of its scabbard. With every inch it was pulled out, the raging and roaring sword chi in the arena surged a little more. When the sword was completely pulled out, the passive version of One with the Sword was fully activated. After a flash of light and shadow, Lotus Sun and Mysterious C's figures had completely fused into one. The girl's blue eyes were even deeper than before, as if there were stars in them, emitting a beautiful and moving luster. Mysterious C's dark blue evening dress also fused perfectly with them. There were many more ripples symbolizing the sea on the hem of the skirt, making it look even more magnificent than before. Even the color of her hair had changed. After becoming one with the sword, it was dyed Mysterious C's silver-gray color. Of course, none of this was important. The key was, the girl found that her chest seemed to have become a lot heavier. The monk had warned her that she had to be extra careful when using Mysterious C on Earth, so she didn't need to unsheath it unless it was absolutely necessary. After fusing with 3 heavenly Tao magic cubes, the newly upgraded passive version of One with the Sword had to be completely unsheathed in order to display this kind of fusion mode. So this was the first time Lotus Sun had experienced such a fusion. In the heavenly guest room, Sun Yinger was so excited that she spoke incoherently. "Rong Rong, you've grown up. That's great. If Rong Rong can grow, then so can I. In the future, we will be able to realize the airbag cushioning plan." Oh. Loopy Toad opened its mouth, but in the end didn't say anything. It didn't know where Sun Yinger had inherited the label of an experienced driver. She really could open up any kind of broken road for her. On the other side, in the sword battle arena, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian, who were also participating in this competition, were deeply impressed by the sword chi released by Mysterious C. As expected of Miss Lotus Sunday, the two sighed inwardly. Of course, they weren't participating in the competition to win the championship, but to ensure Lotus Sun's safety. Thus, when they entered, Wu Jin and Old Barbarian were both thinking about how they could showcase their outstanding acting skills. However, what surprised everyone was that when the King Group competition began, not a single sword spirit took the initiative to attack the other sword spirits. This was the difference in battle tactics between the sword spirits of the King Group and the Bronze Group. This was also one of the reasons why the Bronze Group wasn't as good as the King Group. Especially in this kind of chaotic battle, the one who took the initiative to attack would definitely be the one at a disadvantage. Large-scale attacks would only be met with even fiercer focus fire, and they would be the first to be eliminated. So the sword spirits of the King Group had the same idea before the competition began, and that was to take the initiative to form alliances. Eliminate the other sword spirits of the King Group first. As for how to choose an ally, for the sword spirits of the King Group, this wasn't something they needed to think about at all. Factions could be easily divided according to the material of the sword, or the type of the sword. Thus, when the King Group competition began, the entire sword battle arena was enigmatically silent. Lotus Sun could feel the overflowing sword chi converging in the air. The sword spirits of the King Group were dispersing their sword chi and using it to establish a special spiritual connection to search for their own kind. Then, all kinds of voices of forming factions surged through the sword battle arena. "Great sword party! Come with me. If you don't, you're just a lackey. If the heavens hadn't given birth to my longsword, all eternity would be like a long night. Where is the longsword party?" Many of the sword spirits watching the competition were puzzled. They didn't understand why the sword spirits of the King Group hadn't started fighting yet. Because their cultivation levels were too low. They couldn't hear the sword spirits of the King Group communicating with their sword chi. In the judges' seats, Yuling frowned slightly. This kind of alliance is actually disadvantageous to Miss Sunday. The sword spirits of the King Group have formed small teams like this, and their attacks are more organized and disciplined. Plus, they're hostile to Miss Sun's existence. I'm afraid it's going to be a little difficult. Not necessarily. Nine Nether shook her head and said, Miss Sun is Lady Bai Qiao's disciple. You saw the sword Qi when she became one with her sword. There's something very strange. I don't know why I can sense the power of Heavenly Tao in Mysterious C's sword Qi. Yu Ling frowned slightly. She still didn't know that Mysterious C had fused with the Heavenly Tao magic cube. Nine Nether smiled. Mysterious C now has 4 cores. He has 4 Heavenly Tao magic cubes in his body. 4 Heavenly Tao magic cubes. Yu Ling almost cried out in surprise. When she realized that she had forgotten herself, her little face turned red. Why did he fuse so many? She's Lady Bai Qiao's disciple. Of course she gets preferential treatment. Now that the new magic cube has replaced the old magic cube, it's good that the old magic cube has been recycled and reused, said Nine Nether. Who knew whether it was out of envy or jealousy, but Yu Ling snorted softly. That's all there is, Lemon. By now a full 3 minutes had passed since the start of the match. The sword spirits of the king group hadn't moved at all. They were using their sword Qi to quickly communicate, and the sounds of teams forming rang out incessantly. At that moment, in the mental space created by sword Qi, someone suddenly shouted, Lotus Sun, I love you. I am Big Sword. I will always support Lotus Sun. Miss Sun, I'm on your side. No one can stop me. The short sword party will always love Lotus Sun. After these 2 shouts, the sword spirits of the king group who had been forming teams all revealed angry expressions. Damn. Who shouted that? It's so weird. There's a traitor in our sword spirit team. No. It's not just one. It seems like there are many. In the Sword Qi channel, Endless and Old Barbarian changed their voices in various ways to sow discord in order to stop the sword spirits of the king group from forming an alliance. Very quickly their plan took effect. When the sword spirits who had been looking for a team heard this, they couldn't restrain their anger, as if everyone they looked at was a traitor. The scene quickly became chaotic. Lotus Sun's eyes turned wary. At that moment, a female sword spirit with short white hair and a pair of leather shorts suddenly charged at Lotus Sunday. The day the broken sword is reforged, the day the night returns. It's all your fault, human woman. Eat my sword first. I'm going to cut you down from Mount Everest into a flat-topped mountain. Chapter 1427. The sword spirit, who had short white hair and was wearing a midriff-bearing leather vest and sexy leather shorts, brandished her large green sword and made funny faces as she slashed toward Lotus Sunday. This sword spirit was called Cool Wind, and as her name suggested, she was dressed very coolly. The ghost face sword technique with the taunting effect was one of her killing moves. This sword technique had a facial illusion effect, and if you looked her in the eye, you would be provoked into anger. In a fight, being provoked was actually a big taboo, because anger could affect a person's normal judgment and lead to mistakes. But Mysterious C's sword Qi was extremely powerful, and in the face of such an illusion, the silent nourishment ability was activated. When the sword Qi spread out, all the illusions were seen through. Cool Wind's ghost face sword technique had no effect at all in front of Lotus Sun, and it was like a punch hitting cotton. Looking at the sword spirit who was making funny faces at her and slashing at her, Lotus Sun fell into a brief silence. Under normal circumstances, if she saw this ghost face, she would definitely be angry. But because the ghost face sword technique had failed, Cool Wind's grimacing looked more like she was acting cute. Very cute. She wanted to pinch her own face. But at this moment, Lotus Sun suddenly realized something. Could it be that this was the legendary Lightspeed QA? In the face of Cool Wind's attack, Lotus Sun swiftly drew her sword to block. Mysterious C's sword Qi was more profound than Cool Wind had imagined. The moment the blades collided, she felt all the strength in her body disappear like a clay ox in the sea, swallowed up by Mysterious C's boundless rage sword Qi. Then a powerful backlash came, causing Cool Wind to be sent flying. Watch out! Although the girl had said some outrageous things to her at the beginning, she didn't take it to heart. Instead, she was worried about Cool Wind's comfort. The moment Cool Wind was sent flying, she felt that the sword Qi from Mysterious C's backlash was like a digging tractor crashing into her at high speed. Just when Cool Wind thought she was going to be seriously injured and eliminated, The incomparably ferocious sword chi instantly disintegrated halfway, turning into a gentle force that supported her waist and firmly placed her on the ground. Sorry, I used too much strength, Lotus-san said. She felt that she didn't have good control over Mysterious C's power. The competition was one thing, but she didn't want to seriously injure the sword spirit here. Repaying evil with good? As expected of Miss Lotus-san, but this is a competition. Swords have no eyes. Nine Nether shook his head in the judging panel. He felt that the girl was a little too naive. However, at this moment a shocking scene occurred. Just as Lotus-san was speaking, another streak of sword chi sneaked up on her from behind. Seeing this, Cool Breeze hurriedly rushed over, pushed her away, and fought with the owner of the sword chi. Bang! After the sound of swords clashing, the two figures in the air quickly separated. Sneak attack from behind? Who do you think you are? The irascible Cool Breeze scolded loudly. She didn't look like a girl at all. You didn't have to save me just now. Lotus-san looked at Cool Wind's back and smiled. Cool Breeze turned his head and blushed. Humph! Who wants to save you? I just don't want to give up my prey to others. As soon as he said this, Cool Breeze collided with another streak of sword chi that had attacked Lotus Sunday. So annoying. Why do you always have to target my prey? At that moment, Cool Breeze gripped his big sword and roared angrily. Then I'll kill all of you. And then kill my prey. He roared very loudly, but Lotus-san could clearly feel that Cool Breeze's hostility had completely disappeared. K. She actually defeated a sword spirit just like that. In the judging panel, Mou couldn't help cursing as she began to realize that this Miss Sun in front of her was different from the others. This is Lotus-san's domain. In the heavenly room, Loopy Toad looked at this familiar scene and felt that it was recalling a lot of things. The essence of Lotus-san's domain was the power to capture people's hearts. This kind of power generally only worked on passers-by, but its effect would weaken over time. With the power of the mysterious sea sword chi, Loopy Toad was surprised to find that Lotus-san's domain seemed to have been upgraded. It could automatically increase the favorability of those around it and attack it. In just one move, the girl had defeated a sword spirit, which stupefied Loopy Toad a little. In Loopy Toad's view, Lotus-san had always possessed an incredible power. Unfortunately, the power of the domain is still too weak. At least for little Master Ling, it's far from enough. At that moment, Loopy Toad was lost in thought as it gazed at the image on the screen. In the sword battle arena, Loopy Toad was relying on the favorability effect of Lotus-san's domain. It seemed that Lotus-san really had gathered a lot of allies. At first, the King Group sword spirits had clamored to form an alliance to eliminate Lotus-san, but in the end, it had turned into an alliance to protect her. Of course, the two actors, Woojin and Old Barbarian, had also played a big part in this. Following Lotus-san, they repeated the same trick they had used on the Cool Breeze. They pretended to attack Lotus-san from behind, and then lured the sword spirits protected by the girl into helping her. Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. Does it hurt if the sword chi is a little stronger? Careful. Sneak attack from behind, how shameless. Who wants to help you? I just can't stand them using dirty tricks. Sorry, I almost seriously injured you. Hey, someone sneak attacking you from behind. Get out of the way. Leave it to me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not helping you. I'm just an upright spirit sword. In the sword battle arena, these three mystical sentences were repeated countless times. Then more and more sword spirits inexplicably joined Lotus-san's alliance. What the hell is going on? Why are so many people helping this human girl? In the audience seats, many of the sword spirits watching were so angry that they stamped their feet. Most of them had placed their bets on the King Group's Sword Dao meet sword spirits, and had paid a huge price. Some of them had even gone bankrupt, and invested all their finances in betting on the Sword Dao meet. In the end, no one had expected that less than 10 minutes after the start of the King Group's Sword Dao meet, a third of the sword spirits had already been defeated, and had automatically joined the Protect Lotus-san camp. Looking at the flustered and exasperated sword spirits in the audience seats, Woojin and Old Barbarian sneered in their hearts. Heh, gambling dogs die a horrible death. In the end, 70% of the king group's sword spirits had been defeated by the girl. It looked like there was already no suspense in this match. However, in Sky Room number 2, from beginning to end, the expression on Wang Ling's face didn't relax. He could sense that the people from Infinite Milky Way were about to make a move. Chapter 1428. In the Sword Dao meet, after using the upgraded Lotus Sun domain to obtain an overwhelming advantage in all aspects, it seemed like the champion was already a foregone conclusion. In order to protect the girl, the sword spirits that had been conquered engaged in a fierce battle with the remaining sword spirits, resulting in heavy losses on both sides. In the end, there were less than a dozen sword spirits left in the field. Led by Old K, the last 5 sword spirits would rather die than submit. All of them glared angrily at Lotus Sun and the sword spirit bootlickers who had been conquered behind the girl. At this moment, Old K stood at the forefront in his thick golden armor, his beard fluttering in the wind, looking very much like a Saint Seiya. I, Old K, am not like those bootlickers behind you. Bootlickers? It means lackey plus bootlicker. The sword spirit called Old K was surrounded by golden sword chi. His nickname was the Sword of the King, and he was the 12th ranked sword spirit. His true form was a poker card K. It was said that Dao ancestor Wang had been in seclusion in the Sword King realm, and had played landlord with his clone out of boredom. Who would have thought that even the poker card would become a sword spirit? Old K, what's done can't be undone. I think you'd better give up. You can't imagine Miss Sun's charm. We've already decided to push Miss Sun to win. If you don't, we'll launch a collective attack and take you down with us. Wu Jin said, earnestly analyzing the situation for Old K. Now, not including Miss Sun, there are still 6 of us left. We have one more than you. And Old Man hasn't even used his 5-second man yet. If we go all out at the end, you'll definitely lose. Not necessarily. Old K snorted. As a man with the title of the Sword of the King, he naturally wouldn't admit defeat so easily. Crack. Thud. He stabbed his giant golden sword into the ground. At this moment, 3 different colored sword chi appeared around his body, gushing out from the giant golden sword. It's actually the Great Sword Gambling Technique. Wu Jin frowned. What's the Great Sword Gambling Technique? Although she knew that her question might be inappropriate at this time, Lotus Sun still couldn't suppress her curiosity. Miss Sun, do you see the golden, blue, and red sword chi on that giant golden sword? Wu Jin explained. This 3-colored sword energy was the foundation of Old K's sword gambling art. The golden sword chi could cause those who were attacked by the sword chi to fall into a paralyzed state, unable to move, as if they had been drugged. The blue sword chi could quickly heal the injuries of a specific person. The red sword chi could create an extremely powerful suicidal sword strike, causing a huge explosion. Now that the champion group's group matches were nearing the end, almost everyone was injured to varying degrees. In a situation where they were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, Old K choosing to gamble with swords at this time was indeed a wise choice. When Old K pulled the giant sword out of the ground, the originally emitted 3-colored sword chi would go berserk, causing Old K's golden giant sword to change color. At that time, the giant sword would randomly choose one of the 3 sword energies and transform it into its own power. Wu Jin didn't expect Old K to be so desperate. This was because this great sword gambling art was a secret technique that would cost one's cultivation. Although it was Old K's ultimate skill, very few people had actually seen Old K use it. You actually want to gamble with swords? Wu Jin frowned. What's the point of saying so much? Since he wants to gamble, then let's make him fail. Cool Breeze said from the side. She wanted to rush out and stop the release of this technique. However, Wu Jin stopped her on the spot. If you don't want to be cursed, then stay put. Curse. Cool Breeze was puzzled. Once the Great Sword Gambling Arts Array is formed, we can only gamble with him. Legend has it that the Great Sword Gambling Arts Array contains a curse of the Dao ancestor. If we interfere with the array, we will definitely be cursed by the Dao ancestor. Wu Jin said. At this point Old K, who was wearing heavy golden armor, couldn't help but laugh. It seems that you understand my situation very well. Not bad. You're right. Interfering with the array will indeed cause terrible things to happen. Perhaps because he expected that no sword spirit would dare to cross the line and forcibly interrupt the great sword gambling arts array, Old K's expression was particularly excited and confident. However, for Old K, there were still variables in this great sword gambling art. Although sword spirits could indeed be cursed, if it was a human, in fact, he hadn't done any corresponding experiments. Thus, Lotus Sun became Old K's only worry after he started the great sword gambling art. Perhaps he was afraid that the young girl wouldn't understand the rules and would ruin his plans. Now that Old K had calmed down, he turned his gaze to the only human girl present. Miss, let me ask you, do you dare to gamble with me? If Senior insists on doing things his own way, of course I can't stop him. I just hope that Senior won't hurt himself. Also, gambling itself is wrong, Lotus Sun advised patiently. Lotus Sun patiently admonished it, but she was certain that the sword spirit of the poker sword would never listen to her. Good. You're indeed a heroine. But there's no need for Miss to worry about gambling harming the body. Old K laughed fiercely. If I draw the red card, no matter what the result is, I will forfeit this match. In the current situation, if the giant sword was drawn, both the golden and blue sword chi would be advantageous to their side. But if they drew the red sword chi, then the situation would truly be hopeless. Both had about a 33% probability. The overall probability of Old K drawing the sword chi favorable to him was 66%. He felt that he wouldn't be so unlucky. Miss Sun, don't be afraid. If he draws the red self-destructing sword chi, he's finished. At this time, Old Barbarian also said, when the time comes, I'll add the power of 5 seconds true man to you, so that you're completely immune to this damage. Actually, I can do it myself. Say no more, Miss Sunday. Our goal in this competition is to help you win the championship. Old Barbarian said telepathically. You don't need to worry about anything else. I know Miss Mysterious C is very strong, but you have to give us a chance to show off. Faced with Old Barbarian's enthusiasm, Lotus Sun really didn't know whether to laugh or cry, calculating that the great sword gambling art was about to finish charging up. Old K stepped forward and grasped the giant sword's hilt. As for what the result would be, everything would be revealed the moment he pulled it out. Then, there was a ripping sound. Following Old K's unsheathing of the golden greatsword, a red light erupted from the blade like a volcanic eruption. It's the red sword chi. Seeing this scene, the remaining sword spirits in the field divided the last of their strength to fuse with the sword chi and build a defensive array together. However, the explosion of this red suicidal sword chi was too fast and violent. There was a rumble. A huge mushroom cloud rose from the ground. The 5 sword spirits on Old K's side were instantly sent flying backwards like scarecrows in the field. Heat waves assailed the nostrils. In the judges' seats, 9 Nether, Yuling, Mou, and Little Qian had gathered their strength to build an impenetrable barrier, protecting all the sword spirits in the spectator stands. What's the result? Yuling was curious. She couldn't wait to see through the thick smoke on the field. Then she saw. The 7 people on Lotus Sun's side were unharmed. With Old Barbarian's protection and Mysterious C's blue sword chi, they were firmly protected. Even if the sword spirits were injured, they would be healed by Mysterious C's gentle sword chi. On the other hand, Old K's side seemed to be in a more tragic situation. Apart from Old K, the other members of the giant sword faction were all seriously injured. At this time, Old K stood up and looked at Lotus Sunday. Now, according to the agreement, I forfeit this match. In the judges' seats, facing Old K, Mou frowned slightly. He's really forfeiting? He's such a good gambler? Not necessarily. 9 Nether smiled meaningfully. That's what he's calculated. Calculated it. He calculated it. He must have drawn the red suicidal sword chi, 9 Nether said. The evidence is that while almost all the members of the giant sword faction on Old K's side were seriously injured, Old K himself was unscathed. This shows that he had already made preparations to prevent self-destruction. In addition, Yuling continued 9 Nether's words saying, in addition, all the casinos in the Sword King world are run by Old K. So in this year's King group of bets, the biggest winner is probably Old K himself. You mean? Mou was frightened by Old K's scheming, her beautiful face turning pale. I mean that before the start of the competition, Old K might have bet all his money on Miss Sun, Yuling said. Chapter 1429. The unprecedentedly grand sword Dao meet finally came to an end with Lotus Sun's victory. For the 4 judges, 9 Nether, Yuling, Mou and Little Qian, this result was no surprise, because it had been predetermined. But for the sword spirits watching the competition, this result was clearly a little surprising. And most importantly, at the end of the competition, Old K's sword gambling skill actually added extra authenticity to the King's group competition, because gambling itself had its own uncertainties. If Old K really drew a blue or golden sword aura, he might be able to turn the tables around. Before the King's group competition ended, Cool Breeze glared fiercely at Lotus Sun, the anger surging out of his eyes as if he had an irreconcilable hatred for her. Humph. I'm only forfeiting because I'm severely injured and need treatment. It's not because I have a good impression of you that I'm intentionally going easy on you. So where else does it hurt? Lotus Sun laughed. Back in the arena, Cool Breeze's injuries had already been mostly healed by Mysterious Sea's sword chi, so they weren't actually very serious. Screw you. Red-faced, Cool Breeze rolled his eyes and left in a hurry. She was ranked 16th on the sword list, so she also wanted face. Until this moment, no one would have thought that a chaotic situation was about to unfold. Lotus Sun watched as Cool Breeze left through the passage. This female sword spirit was unforgettable to her. Although her mouth said no, her body was very honest. This was Lotus Sun's evaluation of Cool Breeze. Her extremely tsundere personality also made Lotus Sun feel very cute. She watched Cool Breeze walk all the way to the entrance of the passage, watching his figure gradually disappear into the passage. At this moment, there was a sudden shocking tremor on the ground. Is this an earthquake? Lotus Sun frowned. She sensed that something was wrong. It was an oppressive force from above. Caught off guard, Lotus Sun raised her head and suddenly felt as if an incomparably evil force was seeping in from the endless and deep universe. This force was like a knife, mercilessly cutting open the sword storm of the King's group, and then falling densely from the sky. Countless sword spirits were shocked by this sudden and overwhelming force. Bang! The defensive sword barrier formed by 9 Nether and the others was easily shattered like glass under this overwhelming pressure. What exactly is going on? Yuling frowned deeply. This pressure was too shocking. Even with her battle prowess as one of the top 3 on the sword rankings, it was still a little unbearable. She felt as if her throat was being choked by something, and even breathing became extremely difficult. What is this? Mou was shocked by this pressure. The jade crown on her head changed color according to her emotions, turning into a frightened purple. The faces of 9 Nether and Little Qian had also changed. This sudden and inexplicable force caused them to be at a loss for what to do. The entire Old Sword City and the Sword King World sword spirits started to panic. An invisible creature fell from the sky like rain. It was impossible to tell what it was, but under the illumination of the light, its body turned into a rainbow color. Their bodies were transparent, like colored glass. After landing on the ground, they began to squirm rhythmically. What is that? It looks like a worm. Where did this bug come from? 9 Nether and the others discussed it. Their first reaction after splitting off their sword chi was to kill these bugs. However, when their sword chi swept across these colorful insects, these sword chi were all absorbed by these insects. Then, they started to grow from the size of a grain of rice to the size of a child. Wang Ling watched this scene from the inn. His heart was as calm as an ancient well. The people from the infinite galaxy had finally made their move. What the hell is this? This inexplicably dangerous aura made Loopy Toad uncomfortable all over. Its fur stood on end as it swiftly came to Wang Ling's side from Lotus Sun's room. There's no mistake. This is a strange creature born from chaos, from the infinite galaxy, said Wang Ying. This kind of creature from chaos had never been seen in the Milky Way. This was a type of 7-colored bug. When it was young, it was only the size of a grain of rice. and in its first stage, it was the size of a child. From this stage onward, it had the ability to hug faces, which would completely drain the spirit power in the body of the target it was hugging. They fed on energy and could devour spirit energy. As long as it contained spirit energy, it would be like a school of man-eating fish in a tropical river that swarmed at the sight of meat. It would be devoured clean in an instant. It seems that the other party's goal isn't just Lung Ming and Miss Sun. They even want to destroy Sword King World. Wang Ying frowned slightly. This was already an enemy that Lotus Sun couldn't deal with. Now they had to change hands. Fortunately, Wang Ling had already made arrangements. In the sword battle arena, when these chaos face-hugging bugs absorbed sword chi from the size of a grain of rice and evolved into adult bugs, a Snow White figure also arrived shortly after. Get lost. A youngster in a snow white fur coat arrived and withstood all the pressure on his own. Brown sword chi swept the scene. Although these face-hugging bugs could devour spirit power, their stomachs were limited before they had fully matured, and they exploded on the ground one after another. Like crushed eyeballs, rainbow goo flowed all over the ground. It's Lord Jingbai. Lord Jinka and Lord Bai Qiao have fused. A sword spirit cried out excitedly. They rarely even saw Jinka. But now they saw Jingbai. He felt as if he was dreaming. Your Excellency. The pressure dissipated, and Nine Nether and the others stepped forward and bowed. On my command, all sword spirits in the top 10,000 on the sword list, move out. Eliminate the enemy. There's no need to hold back. Attack with all your might. They won't be able to devour so much energy when they reach the first stage. The rest of you, withdraw your sword chi. Don't let them become nutrients for these face-hugging bugs. Jingbai ordered. Yes, Your Excellency. Nine Nether obeyed. They had to unite the Sword King world, and the key to fighting back was that these bugs absolutely couldn't be allowed to develop into adults. The first and second stages of larvae could be dealt with, but if they developed into the third stage, it would be very difficult. When Lotus Sun opened her eyes again, she found herself in a brand new place. A school at night? The girl looked at the scene in front of her in astonishment, and was stunned to realize that this seemed to be the number 60 high she was familiar with. She released Mysterious Sea's sword chi, and in the end realized that the world she was in was so vast that she couldn't see the end at all. This was a world shrouded in darkness. At that moment, Wang Ying's figure appeared. The defensive seed I planted on Ying earlier worked. If there's any danger, you'll be sent here together. So this is... You still don't know where you are. Wang Ying laughed. What a silly girl. It looks like a place similar to the core world. Lotus Sun said. Not similar. This is the core world. Wang Ying nodded and looked at Lotus Sunday. You're now in Lord Ling's own core world, Lotus Sun. This is classmate Wang Ling's core world. At that moment, she looked at the girl's astonished little face in front of her. Wang Ying instantly felt a little emotional. Unknowingly, you've already become his world. And now, he only had to wait for the day that the sealed twilight was broken through by the light. Chapter 1430. Chaos facehuggers were hard to deal with, but in the end, they were just minions sent by the other side. This was the other side's most basic test. They had yet to use their real trump card. As Wang Ling and the monk had expected, while Sword King World had been attacked, Earth had also been attacked by chaos facehuggers from the infinite Milky Way. Those incorporeal eggs looked colorful when the light passed through them. They were falling densely along the Earth's latitude and longitude lines, as well as various coordinates, like heavy snowflakes. The monk strolled out of the main hall of Battlesek's True Venerate and looked up at the sky. These facehuggers were a huge problem for the sword spirits of Sword King World. Earth hadn't been upgraded for long, and it would take some time for cultivators all over the world to improve their quality. It would be hard to resist such a large-scale attack in a short period of time. Senior, as expected, the satellites all over the world have been disrupted. Huaxiao Alliance is still asking us what on earth happened. His Excellency the head of state is furious, said grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. It's normal to have this kind of reaction in the face of unknown fear. The monk nodded and said, given the current quality of Earth's cultivators, It's normal that they can't sense these things born in the chaos. In fact, the monk was already prepared. Since Wang Ling had given him earth, he would defend it even if he had to sacrifice his life. As early as last night, the monk had already cast a Buddhist net over the entire earth. Although it couldn't completely filter out the facehuggers, it could block more than 90% of them. Grenade-throwing senior immortal frowned. I still don't understand. What on earth is their purpose in attacking Earth? It must be for Miss Rong and that little sword spirit Lung Ming. Lung Ming is of great use to them. And Miss Rong's mysterious sea has already fused with 4 old Rubik's Cubes. As for attacking Earth, I'm afraid it's just something they did in passing. Something in passing? Senior Immortal, haven't you noticed? At that moment, the monk turned his head to look at grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Dao Ancestor Wang set up 9 Rubik's Cubes back then, and the 9th one is on Earth. But Ling Zhenren has already replaced the 9th Rubik's Cube. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was alarmed when he heard this. When I upgraded Mysterious Sea for Miss Rong for the first time, said the monk. Then, with Miss Rong's Mysterious Sea, it's actually with 5 Rubik's Cubes? That's right. However, we're worried that Miss Rong won't be able to control her power very well, so we haven't activated the Rubik's Cube yet. Tyrant smiled. So, I'm afraid he won't be able to retrieve the old Rubik's Cube. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. Since the other party could think of snatching the 9th cube along the way, doesn't that mean that apart from the 5 old Rubik's Cubes in Miss Lotus Sun's hands, they have already collected the remaining 4? It's like this. So you're saying that everything was planned? Let them help us collect it. Miss Rong can also relax a little. The monk nodded. After all, the journey of collecting the old Rubik's Cube is very risky. The immortal star that Miss Rong went to seems very friendly, but in fact, it is full of danger. Ling Zhenren and Lord Ying had arranged everything in advance. An angry unaging star is indeed terrifying. How do we do that? Pay. But your brother has always been poor. Where did he get so much money? Just one sentence. For example, if they don't listen, I'll kill them all. Oh. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal was stunned. This was definitely a naked threat. At that moment, the monk looked up. Through the writing on the wall, he could see that the Buddhist net that had been set up last night had already begun to be triggered. There were still 10% of the chaos facehuggers left on Earth, and they had to be cleaned up manually. For this reason, the monk had found the core members of Battle's sect last night, and cast a temporary illumination spell on everyone's Naiwan palaces. The Naiwan palaces were spiritual hubs, and under the effect of the illumination spell, they could greatly enhance their spiritual perception for a short period of time, and expand everyone's spiritual senses. This was all to make it easier for everyone in Battle's sect to find the facehuggers that had been left on Earth. Sect leader, I'll have to trouble you to act according to my orders. All right. Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal bowed. After watching Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal leave to assign tasks, the monk tiptoed off the ground and turned into a streak of light that shot through Earth's atmosphere like a rocket into outer space. The other party was determined to get the 9th old Rubik's Cube. But the truth was that this Rubik's Cube on Earth had already been replaced. So why did the monk still work so hard to protect Earth? The reason was very simple. Because if he didn't work hard, the other party probably wouldn't take the bait so easily. The more he tried to protect it, the more he could give the false impression that this thing was very important to them. This was all to trick the other party into going all out and bringing this new Rubik's Cube back. The new Rubik's Cube was a trap. If the other party brought it back, they might not even need to steal the tower, and could directly blow up the crystal base on the other side. So far, everything had gone smoothly, but the monk didn't let down his guard because of this. After all, the other party came from the infinite Milky Way, and this was the first time in his life that he had ever seen a chaos facehugger of this scale. Since the other party had been able to collect so many eggs to launch an attack, it was likely that they had been preparing for this for many years. Once they chose to make a move, they were bound to be extremely confident in their actions. Sir, please come out. This humble monk is right here. Not far from Earth, the monk, dressed in a purple and gold kasaya, was gazing somewhere. Very quickly, a figure surrounded by starlight appeared. Surrounded by starlight, the young man's figure gradually solidified into a solid form. Monk, we haven't seen each other for so many years, but you're still so simple. The young man surrounded by starlight greeted the monk as if he knew him. The young man was tall and handsome, and his fair skin was exceptionally eye-catching under the starlight. Peng Shiren. The monk was once a lifelong enemy, but he had died a long time ago. But this time, the monk had a premonition that this person might still be alive. Everything was exactly as he had expected. The monk's expression was indifferent as he stared at the other party. That fortune teller was you, right? I don't know what you're talking about. Peng Shiren smiled, not wanting to admit it. You've always been proud and aloof, but you've actually become someone else's chess piece. If the Tao ancestor knew about this, he would definitely be very disappointed. The monk lowered his eyelids and sighed. It's just that we each take what we need. Peng Shiren put his hands behind his back and corrected him. I'm not a chess piece. I'm just that person's opponent. Everything is built on equal conditions. If something really goes wrong in the end, killing him will be as easy as raising my hand. You're too confident. The monk frowned slightly. You still don't understand that person. You don't know how much the Tao ancestor had to pay to seal him back then. Cut the crap, bald donkey. You don't understand me at all. Peng Shiren smiled at the monk in front of him. Because I'm Tao ancestor Wang's only disciple. Chapter 1431. Tyrant wasn't surprised that Peng Shiren was still alive. After all, just as he said, he was Tao ancestor Wang's only disciple. Be it in the cultivation world or other places, it seemed that as long as one had a certain level of ability, they all liked to play this fake death game, as if they were afraid that others wouldn't know that they were big shots. Tyrant sighed silently. As for faking his death, he had actually played around with it before. Under normal circumstances, Almighties would fake their death in order to dig out the traitors around them and see the attitudes of the people around them. On the other hand, it was to avoid death tribulations. However, this was not the monk's intention. The monk faked his death back then just to be mischievous. He used the experience of one of his lives to experience it, and found out that after faking his death, he would not be able to escape. Those who mourned and commemorated. All sorts of evil spirits would surface after faking their deaths. This process was rather torturous, but the thrill was when he reappeared in front of everyone after his fake death was exposed. In front of him, the young man surrounded by starlight seemed to enjoy the feeling of surprise when others saw him. So, the purpose of you faking your death is to have more energy to invest in the endless Milky Way and search for the Tao ancestors' heavenly tomb. The monk guessed. I already know where the heavenly tomb is. There was only one last step left. I will bring the sealed people along with me. Peng Shiren had already formulated the entire plan, as if victory was already in his grasp. It seems like I can only fight. The monk closed his eyes. Do you still remember that when you saw me, I was a Tao god? But now it's different. Peng Shiren smiled confidently as if victory was within his grasp. I know that you've already stepped into the ancestor realm. If you were a Tao god, I wouldn't even bother to look at you. The monk laughed. Now that his strength had returned to its peak, he was even stronger than before. Me too. Peng Shiren said. We haven't seen each other for many years. Bald donkey, you've also become stronger. I wasn't your match in the past, but I want to see if I'm still weaker than you now. There is always a mountain higher than the mountain. There is still a certain distance between you and your master, said the monk. Tao ancestor Wang's true realm was not just that of a Tao ancestor. He was the first person to enter the ancestor realm. That was why he was called Tao ancestor Wang. And now Tao ancestor Wang was definitely stronger. Even if there is a distance, it won't be too far. I think I've caught up to master's footsteps. Peng Shiren. Boom. Starlight surged around his body, creating great waves. There was a type of powerful fluctuation surging about. At the same time, the blood energy in his body surged violently. A star dragon made of diamond rushed out from Peng Shiren's body. It struggled unceasingly, and then burst out with a dragon roar. When the star dragon appeared, it directly scattered the surrounding starry sky. The energy fluctuations were too strong. Seeing that things weren't going well, Tyrant brought Pungshiren and shifted the battlefield to the Milky Way extraterritorial galaxy, the moment Pungshiren summoned Star Dragon. It's useless even if you change the battlefield. I must obtain the Rubik's Cube on Earth. Pungshiren opened his eyes. Shihachun, Chunai. Tian, I phone I on I ancestor I Dao I said. I on. I said I as I can. This is. The monk's gaze was deep as he stared at Pungshiren, trying to see through him. Pungshiren's body glowed. Starlight surrounded him, exuding an immortal power. After entering the Dao ancestor realm, Pungshiren's realm was not the same as before. He was more oppressive than all the family heads in the deity realm combined. Not only have you entered the Dao ancestor realm, but you've also cultivated the Dao ancestor's myriad realm stardust technique to the 8th level. Such a change really surprised the monk, because when he first met Pungshiren, the young man had just started cultivating this technique, and had not even cultivated to the 2nd level. But now he had already cultivated it to the realm of the great perfection. The 8th level was called the inextinguishable diamond. As long as the power of the starlight was not exhausted, Pungshiren would have an endless source of energy. Even if he was injured, he could quickly recover under the illumination of the surrounding starlight. Bald donkey, as you can see, I'm the inextinguishable son of the stars, Pungshiren murmured. His eyes were cold. His body glowed and the star dragon roared. The myriad world stardust technique was the #1 technique of the Dao ancestor. He was invincible on the battlefield of the universe. I'll let you know what it means to be invincible. Kill. Pungshiren's hair was shimmering with starlight. His eyes were frightening. Without any makeup, he threw a punch at the monk's head. The small fist condensed countless starlight around it. This was Pungshiren condensing the power of the stars. He had refined all the bones in his body into the supreme star bone. He could absorb the power of the starlight around him to increase the density of his bones and greatly enhance his strength. This punch seemed unremarkable. It was not decorated with any skills, but it was still shocking. It would not be a problem to kill a family head in the deity realm. Boom. Monk Jin Deng held his breath. Facing this punch, he meditated and did not dodge. He took it with his own physical strength. In the end, the punch seemed to hit a hard piece of iron. With a hum, there was a high-frequency sound of metal colliding. The monk knew very well that Pungshiren did not use his full strength in this punch. He only used about 30% of his strength. Cough. At this time, blood was seeping from the corner of the monk's mouth. Although he seemed to be unharmed, this punch had caused a certain amount of internal injuries. Bald donkey, you're too confident. You blocked it with your own body, and did not leave any defensive means. Are you looking down on me? Pungshiren said. At the same time, he sighed in his heart. Ordinary opponents wouldn't even be able to withstand 10% of his strength. 30% of his strength was enough to destroy the soul. There were only a few people in this world who could withstand this punch of his. You're injured, bald donkey. Pungshiren could not help but laugh. The monk's confidence had hurt him. However, just as he was feeling pleased with himself, he saw 3 dazzling Buddha flames suddenly bloom on the top of the monk's head. Pungshiren's expression changed instantly. The 3 holy flames of Buddhism. You've actually comprehended them. He could tell at a glance that these 3 flames were the Buddha flames of the past, the Buddha flames of the present, and the Buddha flames of the future. Pungshiren knew many people. However, it was rare to see someone who could comprehend 3 Buddha flames at the same time. As expected of his lifelong enemy, Pungshiren's expression became excited. Now his master had entered reincarnation, and could not care about him for the time being. As long as he killed the monk in front of him. In this universe, no one could restrain him anymore. After all, in this universe, which was surrounded by stars, his 8th level inextinguishable diamond was invincible. Chapter 1432. In the beginning, the Buddha fire was golden in color. Tyrant separated the 3 bundles of Buddha fire, and transformed them into 3 different kinds of strange colors. past, present, and future. The 3 Buddha fires condensed on the top of the monk's head and swirled around his purple and gold kasaya. The gray Buddha fire represented the past. It symbolized the path that had already been taken. You could cherish the past, but you didn't have to cling to it. The meaning of gray was, let go of your attachment after having it. There were worries, but there were no more worries. Green Buddha fire represented the present. It represented good wishes for a smooth future. And white Buddha fire represented the future. It symbolized the unpredictability and all kinds of uncertainties. When the 3 flames gathered, it was like 3 flowers gathering above one's head. And the monk instantly became different. Bald donkey, I'm going to get serious. I'll definitely destroy you with my next attack. Peng Shiren narrowed his eyes and his whole body blossomed with starlight. Starlight gathered under his feet like a storm and transformed into a huge Qilin mount. This was a Dharma mount summoned by a powerful ability. The monk had thought it would be a star dragon, and hadn't expected it to be a Qilin. The dual Dharma form of a dragon and a Qilin. Tyrant frowned slightly. He looked at the young man who was surrounded by the starlight in front of him. A trace of unusual change that was invisible to the naked eye flashed across his calm expression. He was Tao ancestor Wang's only disciple. Peng Shiren was indeed the #1 favored son of heaven since ancient times. The imperial Dharma images of a dragon and a Qilin could actually appear on one person at the same time. If anyone else had been here, they would definitely have been scared out of their wits. Kill. Standing on the Qilin's head with one hand on the Qilin's horn, Wang Ling spurred the mount down like a falling mountain toward the monk. The Qilin raised its front hooves and abruptly smashed them down. The star dragon mark on Wang Ling's body burst out with light, and the twin life magic superimposed on each other, giving him immense strength. At the same time, Wang Ling was calmly observing the battle on the front line through the king's eye. As expected, it's very strong. At least the special effects are good enough. Loopy Toad watched on the side with trepidation. In terms of the situation, the duel between Peng Shiren and the monk didn't seem inferior to the duel between Wang Ling and Wang Ying earlier. The image projected by the king's eye could also very realistically convey the oppressive feeling of the scene here. He comes from the infinite Milky Way, and is Tao ancestor Wang's #1 disciple. As expected, he's extraordinary. Loopy Toad sighed as it observed a certain person's reaction on the side. To be honest, after seeing Peng Shiren's strength, Loopy Toad suddenly had doubts in its heart. It didn't know if Wang Ling could beat Peng Shiren. However, this concern was quickly dispelled, because on the side, Wang Ling's expression didn't change in the slightest. It was as if they were watching an ordinary movie with special effects. No ripples were actually the best reaction. This proved that Commander Ling's strength was definitely not inferior to Peng Shiren's. So here's the problem. Even if he could defeat them, would Peng Shiren be insta-killed like the others before him? It was too curious and couldn't help asking Wang Ling, how is it? Wang Ling? ? Loopy Toad. Can this person be insta-killed? Wang Ling. Very difficult. Is it difficult? Loopy Toad's face was full of disbelief. It was extremely astonished. It hadn't expected that the lord it had known for so long would give such an answer. But since he had said so, it seemed that this Peng Shiren indeed wasn't an ordinary person. Wang Ying couldn't help laughing as she looked at Loopy Toad. What are you thinking? What Commander Ling means is that it's very difficult for this Peng Shiren not to be insta-killed. Loopy Toad was stunned. So this was the true meaning of very difficult? What F*** king difficult? Loopy Toad. This is a Tao ancestor. Wang Ying. Tao ancestor, what's wrong? If he's a Tao ancestor, doesn't he need to be slapped? Loopy Toad. But I clearly saw little Master Ling's troubled expression. Wang Ying. He thinks it's too monotonous to slap him to death every time, and doesn't know what to do. Loopy Toad. And Wang Ying's eyes dimmed at this point, and she didn't say anything else. There was another thing. The source of the fortune teller was undoubtedly Peng Shiren. This debt needed to be settled. And from the looks of it, there was a lot of other information on Peng Shiren. It would be a pity to kill him directly. It would be best if he could be beaten half to death. So keeping his HP down was very important. This was the problem that Wang Ling was having a headache over. Elsewhere, the battle between Peng Shiren and the monk was still going on. The Qilin Dharma image soared through the sky, and when its iron hooves stomped down, the monk's body was instantly torn apart and crushed into golden powder. It's a fake body. But Peng Shiren was Peng Shiren in the end. As Tao ancestor Wang's only disciple, he could see through the monk's trick of using a fake body at a glance. To be able to swap a leopard cat for a crown prince right under Peng Shiren's nose, Peng Shiren couldn't help but admire the monk's magic power. "Monk, you can't get rid of me. In the universe, all the stars are my eyes." Although he still couldn't see the monk's figure, he clearly knew where the monk's real body was. Earlier, the monk had used 3 balls of Buddha fire to cover himself. These 3 kinds of Buddha fire, which controlled the power of the past, present and future, could distort time and space, thus diluting one's spatial presence. But this trick obviously wouldn't fool Peng Shiren. This poor monk is here. When the monk stood in front of Peng Shiren again, Peng Shiren realized that the monk's head was aimed at him. Peng Shiren actually didn't understand what the monk was trying to do. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Monk, are you trying to use the iron head technique to hit me? I'm afraid you can't withstand my physical strength at all. Hitting me with your head is just digging your own grave." Just as he finished speaking, in front of him, the monk's head suddenly emitted a series of machine gun-like da-da-da-da-da sounds, and blue flames rapidly appeared. Tens of thousands of missiles appeared from the 6 scars on the monk's head. These missiles were only the size of a pin, but each of them contained shocking and terrifying energy. What was that? Peng Shiren was puzzled by the monk's actions. To be honest, he was shocked. The missiles that were fired from the scars on the monk's head were shockingly powerful and filled with unimaginable power. Most importantly, Peng Shiren actually smelled the scent of a heavenly tribulation. This monk can actually use his own abilities to summon the heavenly tribulation? Peng Shiren frowned, finding it hard to understand. The heavenly tribulation was a divine power that was naturally produced when one's realm crossed. The higher one's realm, the stronger the heavenly tribulation they faced. Peng Shiren remembered that when he leaped from the Tao God realm to the Tao ancestor realm, the scene was so exaggerated that he nearly died in that tribulation. But now the missiles that the monk fired from the scars were actually the same power as when he transcended the heavenly tribulation. How did he do it? The monk couldn't help but laugh. This is the power of the heavenly tribulation that this penniless monk absorbed after nearly 4,000 reincarnations. Now this penniless monk will shoot them all out and give you a wave of rockets. Chapter 1433. It was the energy of the apocalypse that the monk had condensed after almost 4,000 reincarnations. During every apocalypse, the monk had the habit of absorbing the energy of the apocalypse with the ring scar and storing it. All the energy would reside in the top of the monk's skull as a backup energy source for emergencies. For example, when the monk traveled the universe, the apocalypse could supply him with a huge amount of spiritual energy in case he ran out of spiritual energy. For example, when the monk wanted to eat hot pot, he would set up a pot above his head, put some vegetables in it, and heat it with the spiritual energy brought by the apocalypse. Another example was the monk's light consecration technique. The consecration technique consumed a lot of spiritual energy, but it was much more convenient with the energy of the apocalypse. The energy of the apocalypse that was stored could also be used as a weapon. As long as it was combined with the iron in his body, the monk could quickly condense a missile coat that contained the energy of the apocalypse and launch it from his ring scar. What a lunatic! He's actually storing the apocalypse in his skull. Peng Shiren did not expect the monk to have such a trick at all. The energy of the apocalypse was too violent. Was it something that could be stored in one's head? If it was not careful, one's head might explode. It could only be said that the monk was indeed an iron-headed man. Such an action was no different from installing a nuclear power plant in one's head, which was in a state of high risk of leakage at any time. And now, the monk had created a lot of weapons with the mobile nuclear power plant in his head. What a joke! That was not the way of cultivation at all. Peng Shiren's expression was grave. The missiles that were launched seemed small, but they were extremely destructive. More importantly, there were too many of them. It was no different from the scene of tens of thousands of godly punishments descending on the world. Staring at the countless missiles, Peng Shiren immediately moved away to avoid them. However, the missiles had a tracking function and could completely ignore the obstacles in front of them. The aura of the apocalypse emitted from the warheads formed an energy coat that protected the warheads during the shuttle, which could ignore all the small meteorites in front of them. I have to block them with something bigger. Peng Shiren condensed the strength of his fist and punched through a small planet in front of him. He repaired the damaged planet with the power of stars the moment he passed it. His movement was so fast that some of the missiles that were tracking him crashed into it. Then, the planet would be blown to smithereens. Boom! The planet exploded. Accompanied by the shrill screams of the planet's spirit, flames and high temperatures erupted into the sky. At that moment, Peng Shiren looked behind him and saw that a large number of guided missiles had rushed out of the explosion zone. Damn it! Peng Shiren did not expect this guided missile to be so powerful. He used this method to try to exhaust the missiles, but found that in reality, it did not consume much at all. The guided missiles of the apocalypse were too powerful. Only one or two of the missiles at the front would be able to blow up a planet, and the large group of missiles behind them would still be able to pass through safely without any damage. There's no other way, monk. You forced me to do this. Peng Shiren realized that at this moment, if he didn't come up with some tricks, he would probably be at a disadvantage in this battle. Peng Shiren hadn't wanted to use his next killer move, which he had planned to use against Wang Ling. He might even be able to kill that young man with a single punch. But now, Peng Shiren felt that he had no choice but to act. These tens of thousands of guided missiles were indeed hard to deal with. But the monk had accumulated these guided missiles over a long period of time, and they weren't endless. Peng Shiren could only dodge them as he gathered the power of the stars around him. He was like a moving black hole that sucked in all the starlight nearby and condensed it into his body. The monk saw that the star dragon mark on Peng Shiren's body was glowing. At that moment, the monk's lips curled up coldly, because he had already achieved his goal. The monk hadn't used the guided missiles to kill Peng Shiren in the first place. This man's methods were superb, and he definitely had a way to deal with guided missiles of this level. So from the beginning, the monk's goal had been to force out more of Peng Shiren's unique skills. He knew that Wang Ling was definitely watching the battle at that very moment. In this duel between the monk and Peng Shiren, winning or losing wasn't the key. The key was for Wang Ling on the other side to better understand Peng Shiren. After firing around 160,000 guided missiles, the monk's inventory was almost empty. The blue fire on the scar on the top of his head disappeared, and steam billowed out. Peng Shiren knew that his chance had come. Monk, your turn is over, it's my turn. The monk raised his eyebrows. He himself hadn't expected that his battle with Peng Shiren would actually be a turn-based game. But what kind of skill on earth would the other party use? The monk was also very curious. At that moment, the monk raised his smoking head and looked in front of him. He saw Peng Shiren suddenly stop somewhere in the depths of the Milky Way. Starlight burst out of his body and gave off a terrifying light. All the starlight he had absorbed while dodging earlier burst out at that moment, like a small sun. In just a split second, it was as if time in front of him had stopped. The burst of starlight actually distorted space and time, causing the flow of time in the surroundings to drop, and slowing down the heavenly tribulation guided missiles that were charging forward at top speed. At that moment, it was as if the entire universe had been imprisoned, and only Peng Shiren's destructive starlight was dazzling and dazzling. This divine ability was so astonishing that even the monk was astonished for a moment. A few seconds felt like an eternity. Then, from a distance, Peng Shiren threw a punch in the monk's direction. Milky Way fist. Rumble. At that moment, all the starlight in Peng Shiren's body burst out, and a star dragon the size of a trillion charged at the monk, as if it could directly reach the ends of the universe. This was a terrifying punch formed from the power of countless stars. Howl. As the star dragon closed in on the monk at the speed of light, it split into thousands and tens of thousands of dragons, and the sound shook the entire universe. The Milky Way outside the Milky Way was no longer calm. The enormous beam of energy produced by the Milky Way fist smashed everything in its path to smithereens. "Monk, this is the last blow." Peng Shiren looked at his masterpiece, full of confidence. It went without saying that his Milky Way fist was immensely powerful. If he charged it longer, it would be even more powerful. This punch might not be able to kill the monk, but Peng Shiren didn't think it would be a problem at all for it to seriously injure him. Just as the Milky Way fist was about to reach the monk, at that moment, a figure appeared in front of the monk. "Welcome, immortal king." The monk closed his eyes and smiled. He stared at the incomparably dazzling star dragon that was the manifestation of the Milky Way fist in front of him, and blew gently. Whoosh! There was a bang. The vast expanse of starlight in front of him instantly vanished like a candle flame. Chapter 1434. The galaxy fist was extremely powerful, and Wang Ling could clearly sense the universe resonating with it when it was used. He was worried that the monk wouldn't be able to withstand this blow, so he made a move. Although he hadn't used all his strength in this blow, it was definitely more than enough to withstand a head-on impact. But Wang Ling never expected that Peng Shiren's galaxy fist would actually be as weak as a candle. And in the blink of an eye, it turned into a wisp of smoke and disappeared. A little weak. Wang Ling felt that it was completely different from what he had imagined. Of course, the upper limit of the galaxy fist was actually quite high. After all, it was a fist technique that accumulated power. As long as Peng Shiren had enough time, he might really be able to accumulate enough power to injure Loopy Toad. After all, the universe was really too big. Boundless. Surrounded by countless stars, Peng Shiren gathered the power of the stars and condensed it into energy, which could be said to be inexhaustible. In the Yin and Sword King world, Wang Ying was broadcasting the scene in Wang Ling's place. He didn't have the king's eye. Thus he could only use the shadow imaging spell. 4K super high frame rate, smooth movements, zero delay. The only drawback was that the image was black and white. It gave Loopy Toad the feeling that it was watching an old black and white movie. Wang Ling had personally gone to help the monk, and Sword King World would be fine with him and Jingbai there. Loopy Toad was so startled by this scene that its mouth fell open. Why do I feel like I just blew a birthday cake? It's already very impressive to be able to offset Lord Ling's breath. Otherwise, this breath might have directly pierced through the air and hit him, Wang Ying said as he folded his arms. So the progenitor realm is actually very strong? Loopy Toad asked. Of course. Wang Ying nodded. There aren't many people in this world who are at the progenitor realm. Even the heads of the major families in the domain of the gods haven't been able to take this step. Only this person from the Gu family has shown some signs of it. Although this realm is extraordinary, it's still nothing compared to Lord Ling. Loopy Toad. Earlier, Wang Ling and Wang Ying had been worried about the infinite galaxy. Due to their lack of understanding of the infinite galaxy, they had imagined Peng Shiren to be a little too powerful, since he was an expert who could remove the Dao Talisman seal. Now that they saw it, they couldn't help but think, that's it. At that moment, Loopy Toad sighed. It looks like this Peng Shiren is going to die. Not necessarily. Wang Ying shook his head. Your lordship didn't intend to kill him, because there are still many questions he wants to ask him. Besides, this is a progenitor realm expert after all. He probably has many methods of resurrection. That's true. Loopy Toad nodded. At this moment, it suddenly had a question in its head. It was normal for someone like Peng Shiren to have life-saving skills. However, no matter how troublesome he was, could he be more troublesome than that Baizha? Who knew what that Baizha would think of him in the future and forcefully come over to cause trouble? On the other side, outside the Milky Way. After Wang Ling had quelled the Milky Way fist in one breath, the nearby space fell into a momentary silence. It's you. At that moment, Peng Shiren stared in horror at the figure that had suddenly appeared in front of the monk like a ghost. The corner of his eyes twitched. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The Milky Way fist that he had condensed was extinguished by his opponent effortlessly. This was something Peng Shiren did not expect. He had long known that Wang Ling was very strong. He was definitely an expert above the progenitor realm. But now, Peng Shiren felt that he had still slightly underestimated Wang Ling's true battle strength. Although the monk's words earlier had been very soft, Peng Shiren had still heard them. He had heard Monk Golden Lamp say, "Welcome, Immortal King." Immortal King. What realm was this? After Dao Ancestor, all the realms had the word Ancestor. And Dao Ancestor was the beginning of the progenitor realm. But as far as Peng Shiren knew, there was no realm called Immortal King. Could it be that this was another realm beyond the progenitor realm? How was that possible? Peng Shiren frowned slightly. He didn't want to believe it. But this handsome man with dead fish eyes was standing in front of him. He didn't give off the slightest aura, but just by standing there, Peng Shiren felt an indescribable pressure. How dare you call yourself an Immortal King? Even my Shifu isn't as conceited as you. Peng Shiren stared at Wang Ling's starlight gathered in his hands, and it looked like he was trying to condense a second Milky Way fist. Wang Ling had already sensed it long ago, but pretended not to know. In any case, this punch actually wasn't much of a threat to him when it didn't have enough power to build up. Immortal King for Wang Ling, this was just a title. In fact, even Wang Ling himself didn't know what his limits were. At the very beginning, when he was born, his realm had steadily increased every 2 years. But after that, the speed at which his realm grew was out of control. Until now, even Wang Ling himself didn't know how many realms he had broken through. There were even times when he broke through unconsciously. When he was sleeping, when he was studying, when he was squatting on the toilet, when he was eating crispy noodle snacks, when he was voting for Kuchuan. He could break through at any time. And the strange thing was that he didn't need to go through a tribulation each time he broke through. He was completely different from other cultivators. So he didn't know if it was because he was born with amazing bones, or because the heavenly tribulation didn't dare provoke him at all. BCT. While Wang Ling was in a daze, Peng Shiren in front of him moved again. He condensed godly power in his hands, and as he did so, he solidified the Dharma imprints on his arms. As if they had awakened, the 2-star dragon imprints abruptly jumped out of his arms and wrapped around Peng Shiren's forearms layer by layer. The dragons coiled around each other until they finally formed a spiral muzzle. It seems that this is the complete form of the Milky Way fist. The monk was astonished. He hadn't expected Peng Shiren to be able to transform his Dharma into a weapon. The power of the Milky Way fist in this form would be even greater. Peng Shiren was immensely pleased with himself, and full of confidence. Wang Ling, you dare wait for me? Milky Way Cannon Fist Cannon. Have you finished accumulating power? Wang Ling spread his hands indifferently and motioned for Peng Shiren to do as he pleased. Peng Shiren was infuriated by Wang Ling's frivolous attitude. You're not even going to use your Dharma? Are you looking down on me? Do you think you can withstand my punch with just your physical strength? Wang Ling. Hearing this, he sighed silently. He just felt that this person in front of him was so troublesome. It was clearly for this person's sake that he hadn't used his Dharma. In the end, Peng Shiren blamed Wang Ling for looking down on him. Since he had already said so, Wang Ling felt that he didn't need to be polite anymore. In the blink of an eye, a dot the size of a grain of rice appeared on Wang Ling's face. From a distance, it looked like a tear mole at the corner of his right eye. Are you kidding me? This mole is your Dharma? The corner of Peng Shiren's mouth twitched as he stared at the mole at the corner of Wang Ling's eye. And then, there was no then staring at the mole. He instantly felt the space around him expand infinitely, and his entire mind went into a trance. In the next moment, Peng Shiren's face turned deathly pale. Because in this black mole, Peng Shiren saw something that he could not imagine, and that was terrifying. Chapter 1435. Peng Shiren rubbed his eyes. At first, he thought he was seeing things. Impossible. The thing hidden in that mole made his hair stand on end. There was no mistaking it. Although it was only a faint outline, he couldn't see the true form of the Dharma in the mole. He could only catch a glimpse of its outline. His eyes were already bloodshot. Then, with a poochie sound, Peng Shiren's eyes spat out 2 streams of blood, as if they were meatballs that had been pissed. Then they quickly recovered under the starlight around them. The monk was amazed by Peng Shiren's means. It was indeed a little scary to be able to repair itself despite Wang Ling's backlash. Back then, when he was trying to trace the source of the royal decree, one of his vases had been destroyed. And now, Tyrant guessed that the thing Peng Shiren saw should be the faint silhouette of a human being born in the primal chaos. Tyrant had a guess in his heart, but he wasn't sure what it was. But looking at Peng Shiren's pale face, he seemed to have recognized the origin of this human silhouette. Why do you have such a thing on you? Peng Shiren was frightened, and the hairs on his body stood up. He was sure that he was not mistaken. Through the mole in the corner of Wang Ling's eye, Peng Shiren felt as if there was another universe hidden inside it. This black mole was like a black hole, attracting his gaze and gradually guiding his spirit, completing a high-speed interstellar travel. And in the center of the universe that this black mole had transformed into, what Peng Shiren saw was the human silhouette born from the chaos, the spirit of the universe. This was what he had seen. A person could actually transform the spirit of the universe into a Dharma idol? But from the looks of it, the spirit of the universe doesn't seem to have fully awakened. If he were to wait for the cosmos spirit to truly awaken, the young man before him might become even more powerful than he was now. Peng Shiren's Adam's apple bobbed. He had always thought that Wang Ling was just a progenitor expert hiding on Earth like a monk. But in the end, Peng Shiren realized that he had underestimated the young man in front of him. If he wanted to kill him, he could only do so now, before he was fully formed. If he were to wait until he matured, he would not be able to defeat him at all. In his hand was Peng Shiren's Milky Way cannon punch. Still accumulating power, he looked at Wang Ling. If you have the ability, wait for me to accumulate power for a while more. Wang Ling shrugged indifferently. He could actually feel that Peng Shiren was very regretful now. She regretted her words back then, forcing him to summon his Dharma. If he did not have the Dharma form, Peng Shiren might have already punched. But after seeing Wang Ling's Dharma idol, Peng Shiren instantly felt that this little bit of power was probably far from enough. So he once again applied to accumulate power. To be honest, he really wanted to slap himself to death. Why did he have to be so eloquent in the midst of a great battle? However, the problem was that even Peng Shiren himself did not expect the youth before him to possess an aspect that was the universe's spirit. Wasn't that what his master had been searching for and giving up on? Are you done? At that moment, Wang Ling stared at Peng Shiren, and his flat voice rang in Peng Shiren's mind. No. Let's wait a little longer. Peng Shiren frowned. His face was completely red from the accumulation of power. Wang Ling was familiar with this state. It was like what Father Wang usually felt when he squatted on the toilet, because of constipation. Constipation also required power. In addition to accumulating power, he also had to learn precise calculations. Peng Shiren needed to calculate how much power he needed to accumulate before he could defeat himself. And Father Wang needed to calculate what kind of shape he should take after he finished accumulating power, so that the water splashing into the toilet wouldn't splash his butt. In that moment, these two completely different behaviors were surprisingly strikingly similar to each other. Sure enough, life was full of knowledge. Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He counted the time on his fingers, then looked at Peng Shiren and warmly reminded him, "Are you done? You're so annoying. Can't you wait a little longer?" Annoyed by the question, Peng Shiren flipped out on the spot. The monk laughed coldly. "With such a bad attitude, I think Ling Zhenren shouldn't wait any longer and just attack. Bald donkey. This is a fight between me and him. Don't get in the way." Hearing the monk's words, Peng Shiren instantly panicked. He was afraid that Wang Ling would attack before he finished accumulating power, so he almost immediately roared. But Wang Ling was silent and didn't say anything. He knew that Peng Shiren was anxious, but he was willing to keep waiting. Even if he died, he wanted Peng Shiren to know why he died. After about another quarter of an hour, when he had memorized pi to more than 10,000 digits, Peng Shiren finally moved. On the other side, Peng Shiren finally responded. "I'm coming, Wang Ling. It's finally starting." Wang Ling sighed in his heart. He had never felt that fighting with someone could actually be so torturous. He had waited long enough for this punch. He hoped that Peng Shiren could really hurt him, even if it was just a scratch on his skin. After all, Wang Ling had never had a scratch on his skin since he was a child. When he fell, the surroundings would shake, and even the spirit of the earth would tremble. Wang Ling, you actually let me accumulate power for so long. I'm telling you, this will be the most regretful decision you'll ever make in your life. At that moment, Peng Shiren suddenly grit his teeth. Die. The next moment he threw a punch. This was the Milky Way Cannon Fist Cannon, which he had been accumulating power for nearly half an hour. Finally, it flew out of his hand. A light wave with a radius as large as the sun blasted straight in Wang Ling's direction. Everything in its path was destroyed, and the planets in its way were directly pierced through, accompanied by the screams of the spirits of the major planets, and the roar of the planet's core explosion. The light of the cannon version of the Milky Way fist instantly flew in front of Wang Ling. Boom! In the end, this cannon accurately bombarded Wang Ling. There was a huge explosion where Wang Ling was. The terrifying impact of the Milky Way fist's light wave shook the universe, and the resulting blast wave caused the surrounding planets to move several light years away. This scene was like a series of chain reactions when the cue of a billiard ball hit the billiard ball. The monk was amazed by the scene. Success! Peng Shiren was pleasantly surprised. However, he had only been happy for less than 3 seconds when the unscathed figure of the youngster gradually appeared in front of him amid the devastating light of the explosion. No way! Sweat beads the size of beans covered Peng Shiren's face almost instantly. This punch, which he had been accumulating power for half an hour. In the end, the youngster in front of him was actually unscathed. Not bad. Wang Ling raised his eyebrows and rubbed his hair with his index finger. Under Peng Shiren's cannon version of the Milky Way fist, his hair had curled up. Peng Shiren. He had given him a perm. In all these years, Wang Ling had never permed his hair. Because his hair was too hard, he couldn't do it at all. And now, he was even more reluctant to kill Peng Shiren. Wang Ling felt that Peng Shiren had the potential to be Tony's teacher. Chapter 1436. Curly hair? That was a pretty good experience. After the cannon version of the Galaxy Fist, Wang Ling's hair became curly with a very natural curve. Furthermore, this curl should be able to last for a while. After all, this was an attack that Peng Shiren had accumulated strength for 30 minutes. If Wang Ling's hair reverted to its normal hairstyle in a few seconds, that would be too disrespectful to Peng Shiren. At the very least, the accumulated energy from the Galaxy Fist had curled his hair. In Wang Ling's view, Peng Shiren's strength wasn't too bad. But for it to kill Wang Ling, Peng Shiren was probably still a little lacking. When Wang Ling looked at Peng Shiren again, he saw that Peng Shiren's nervous expression had changed. It had been pale white at first, but now it had turned a dark purple. His face was full of doubt that was beyond comprehension. "You, what realm on earth are you?" Wang Ling shook his head. To be honest, he didn't know either. The title of Immortal King wasn't bad, but that was what the monk had said. Currently, there was no clear concept of what realm came after the Ancestor Realm. Back then on Ninefold Star, where the domain of the gods was located, Dao Ancestor Wang, the founder of Ninefold Star, had also been called Immortal King by some people. However, this title seemed too big, and Dao Ancestor Wang hadn't accepted it. Now the question had fallen back on Wang Ling. So did he deserve it? Wang Ling felt that perhaps he was also a little lacking. "What on earth is your relationship with my Shifu?" Peng Shiren stared at Wang Ling. The last person who had made him feel so oppressed was his Shifu Dao Ancestor Wang. "Shiren, you know very well. Ling Zhenren and Dao Ancestor Wang have nothing to do with each other." At that moment, the monk interjected. At first, this humble monk also suspected it, but later I realized that the difference between them is very obvious. This was the monk's euphemistic way of putting it. The most obvious difference was, of course, the difference in strength. The Heavenly Dao Magic Cube was something that Dao Ancestor Wang had painstakingly created, but in Wang Ling's hands, it was nothing more than a casual pinch. This gap was so big that it was like hundreds of millions of Mariana Trenches separating them. It was impossible to cross. Apart from that, the most obvious point, which had just been revealed, was the problem with Wang Ling's Dharma idol. Dao Ancestor Wang's Dharmic idol was a creature named Ho. It had a pair of feet on its head and wide wings. Normally, it was in human form, and it wore a set of metal armor that was covered in heavenly Dao runes. It towered between heaven and earth, hundreds of millions of zhang tall. The monk had only seen it once. At that time, it gave monk Jin Deng a great shock. However, the bigger the Dharma idol, the stronger it would be. So when it came to Wang Ling's Dharma idol, Wang Ling didn't care. Then there was no need for further discussion. The spirit of the universe. It was nothing more than a silhouette that resembled a human silhouette. One couldn't even see its face clearly, but that oppressive feeling was enough to make one kneel down in submission just by looking at it. This was a powerful creature known as the center of the universe. An existence that controlled an entire universe. An existence that was the spirit of all the planets. At that moment, hearing Monk Jin Deng's astonished voice, Wang Ling looked at him and asked telepathically, "So is he very strong?" Monk Jin Deng. Of course, Wang Ling. Oh, in fact, if the monk and Peng Shiren hadn't been secretly shocked, Wang Ling really wouldn't have known that his Dharma idol was the spirit of the universe. This was the first time Wang Ling had heard of this. Previously, he had seen other people's Dharma idols, which were big and mighty. His Dharma idol was just a humanoid creature, and Wang Ling felt that he couldn't show it off. In the end, the truth was finally revealed today. So the current situation. All three of them were shocked. Peng Shiren was shocked because he didn't know where Wang Ling came from. The monk was shocked because Wang Ling actually didn't know anything about his Dharma idol. And Wang Ling was shocked because it turned out that this Dharma idol, which he had always regarded as beneath him, was actually so strong. This person, what the hell is going on? Now seeing Wang Ling's expression of sudden realization, as if he had just learned what the spirit of the universe was, Peng Shiren's face was full of panic and confusion, and the corners of his mouth twitched continuously. Was this the legendary powerhouse? So strong that he didn't even know how strong he was? Without further ado, when Wang Ling raised his hand at Peng Shiren, the black mole at the corner of his eye had already disappeared. He withdrew his Dharma idol of his own accord. The main thing was that he was worried that he would accidentally kill Peng Shiren. To deal with Peng Shiren, he didn't need to use the power of his Dharma idol. Seeing Wang Ling raise his arm at him, Peng Shiren was also terrified. "If I die, I'll definitely drag you down with me." Wang Ling actually still had a lot of things he wanted to ask Peng Shiren. He didn't have any intention of directly erasing him. Of course, he could do it whenever he wanted. "Maybe you're not afraid of me, but you can't protect everyone around you." At that moment, Peng Shiren stared at Wang Ling, his brain working at top speed as he prepared to shoot his mouth off. The monk knew that Peng Shiren was deliberately stalling for time. Very quickly, Peng Shiren's actions confirmed the monk's thoughts. "The outcome of my battle with you isn't the key." In the next moment, Peng Shiren's expression suddenly changed. Because he had obtained the Rubik's Cube. Just now, when he had been fighting with the monk, Peng Shiren had secretly sent a clone to Earth to take the Rubik's Cube away. Peng Shiren was secretly delighted, because this heavenly Dao Rubik's Cube actually looked very new, as if it was brand new. The monk gritted his teeth. "Do you know what you're doing? If you release that sealed person, you'll be doomed eternally." "I know very well what I'm doing. Also, after this test, I have a deeper understanding of your and Wang Ling's strength. If I have the power of that sealed person and we join hands, we might be able to fight on equal footing, or even overflow." Peng Shiren's lips curled up. Then his figure started to fade. Seeing this, Wang Ling pretended to panic and hurriedly reached out to grab him. 5 fingers that blotted out the sky came crashing down. When they came down, Peng Shiren's entire body had already turned into particles of light, as if he had disintegrated. In this vast universe, Peng Shiren's last words were left behind. "You're very strong, but you lack experience, and your reaction is really too slow. My figure can disappear under the starlight, and no one in the universe can catch me. See you next time." Then, Wang Ling withdrew his hand. The expression on his face was very calm. "Zhenren, you deliberately spared his life, and even pretended to have made a mistake so that you couldn't catch him. It looks like the fish has taken the bait." The monk bowed to Wang Ling. He couldn't help chuckling in his heart, thinking that Peng Shiren would lose sooner or later because he thought himself clever. Peng Shiren was crafty. When he had used the canon version of the Galaxy Fist earlier, Wang Ling had already noticed that Peng Shiren had sent a clone to Earth to steal the Rubik's Cube. Peng Shiren had predicted that Wang Ling and the monk would focus all their energy on the battle at hand, and wouldn't care about anything else. In the end, they had successfully taken the Rubik's Cube away. But he hadn't expected Peng Shiren to bring it back as part of Wang Ling's plan. Wang Ling had predicted Peng Shiren's actions. Zhenren, Peng Shiren is crafty. If we don't go after him right now, I'm afraid he'll notice that something has changed with the Rubik's Cube, the monk said at that moment on the side. Wang Ling nodded. Next, it was time to show off his acting skills. Peng Shiren claimed that no one in the universe could catch him. Wang Ling could only smile at this confidence. The reason why he hadn't set off right now wasn't because he really couldn't catch Peng Shiren. It was because he felt that Peng Shiren was slipping too slowly. So Peng Shiren deliberately ran first. Chapter 1437. At the same time, in Wang Ling's inner world, Lotus Sun looked around. Number 60 High School was like an isolated island in this huge world, and at first glance looked a little deserted. For some reason, the school had clearly been renovated and remodeled. Number 60 High School here still looked like an old school, with the dilapidated stone carvings at the main entrance and the old but still standing palm trees next to the teaching buildings. Everything gave off a very familiar feeling. The screen in the school square was playing the result of the fight between Wang Ling and Peng Shiren in real time. Sitting on a bench under a tree, the girl could see the big screen from this angle. When she saw Wang Ling, whose hair had been permed by Peng Shiren's fist, she couldn't help blushing a little. Suddenly, she had the sudden urge to rub Wang Ling's hair. Curly Hair's classmate Wang Ling was also very cute. "Do you want to go in and take a look?" Wang Ying asked. He had been with Lotus Sun the entire time, but this didn't affect Wang Ying's real body's battle in the Sword King world, because it was just a split body that was with Lotus Sun. "Can I go in?" Lotus Sun asked. "Of course." Wang Ying nodded. Throughout the fight, she had been sitting obediently on the bench, staring fixedly at the various scenes on the screen. It was as if she was afraid of missing out on any details. "Weren't you worried all this time whether Lord Ling could beat him? When the canon version of the Galaxy Fist hit him, I saw you so nervous that you clutched your skirt." Wang Ying couldn't help laughing. "You should be relieved to see the current situation. Why don't you go in and take a look?" How could I?" Lotus Sun's face was boiling hot. Wang Ying couldn't help laughing at her immature reaction. "Forget it, I won't tease you anymore. There's no point in teasing you. Inger is far more interesting." Lotus Sun was curious. "Why do you always?" She resists and struggles, and the more she resists, the more excited I get. "You're too gentle, not at all like Inger, so boring," Wang Ying replied. Although he was just a split body, there was no essential difference between the split body and the original body, and the thoughts in his head were the same. "But that's not right. Why do you look like you know everything? You're clearly just shadows." Lotus Sun asked the question she had always wanted to ask. He was right. Wang Ying and Sun Yinger were essentially their shadows, but for some reason, Lotus Sun always felt that both of them were a little too mature. Those void creatures have lived for too long. She is the Lord of the Void, and all the void creatures share their memories. It's normal for her to become an old driver. "What about you, CEO Ying? Didn't I absorb her ability? I didn't want it to be like this." Wang Ying shrugged. "So you're blaming me?" At this time, the girl looked at the teaching building in front of her. "Is the layout inside the same as number 60 old schools? Why don't you go and take a look and you'll know?" Wang Ying kept him guessing. Why was number 60 old school the only one left in the inner world? Actually, Wang Ying could guess it just by guessing. Wang Ling's conclusion was that he was lazy and couldn't be bothered to rebuild his model. If Immortal Jinyuan, a construction maniac who was passionate about creating my world, was here, the core world would definitely be built to perfection. However, to Wang Ying, this conclusion was purely an excuse. There was no other way. His master was too dull. "Sure enough, Inger was right, you're a bad guy." She got up and straightened her skirt and messy thoughts. Then, she looked at Wang Ying next to her and nodded. Then let's go take a look. On the other side, Wang Ling reckoned that it was about time since Peng Shiren had escaped for some time. The other party was moving extremely fast, and had already put a distance of almost 10 billion light years between them. Zhenren, aren't you going to move? The monk asked on the side. To be honest, this was a little too far, and he felt that it would be a little difficult to catch up. At least, he probably wouldn't be able to. But after all, the person Peng Shiren was dealing with was Wang Ling, so the monk still had some expectations. And Wang Ling really didn't disappoint him. The youngster in front of him suddenly spread open his well-defined fingers and grabbed in one direction. At that moment, he was like an emissary who had unveiled the prelude to the universe. Brilliant light gathered in his palm, and an immortal aura emanated from it. The monk looked at this scene in astonishment. He was astonished when he saw the ball of light condensing in Wang Ling's palm. Primal chaos tribulation light. This was a natural phenomenon that occurred when the energy was too great and resonated with chaos. In essence, it was a self-defense mechanism in the universe. When the primal chaos tribulation light appeared, it would collide with something with too much energy and counteract it. But it was clear that the primal chaos tribulation light couldn't erase Wang Ling. Instead, the primal chaos tribulation light that had appeared was being toyed with by Wang Ling at this moment. He's actually using the naturally produced primal chaos tribulation light to build a tunnel that spans 10 billion light years. The monk was extremely astonished. He hadn't expected such a miraculous operation to exist, because under normal circumstances, ordinary spirit power couldn't complete a huge project like building a tunnel that spanned 10 billion light years. But Wang Ling had actually used his own spirit power to stimulate the universe to produce a self-defense, primal chaos tribulation light, which he then used for his own purposes. It was all done in the blink of an eye. Wang Ling just raised his hand lightly, and the tunnel was already complete. Then his figure moved, and he directly stepped into the tunnel ahead. Tyrant followed closely behind. He couldn't wait to see what was going to happen next. At that moment, Peng Shiren, who thought he had already escaped far away, was immensely pleased with himself. He estimated that he was already more than 10 billion light years away. And his aura was perfectly concealed by the starlight. Whether it was Wang Ling or the monk, no matter how capable they were, it was impossible for them to find trouble with him. Now he just needed to send back the Rubik's Cube in his hand, and his mission this time would be considered a success. But it wasn't that Peng Shiren didn't have his doubts. He felt that his mission this time had gone a little too smoothly. Could it be that the Rubik's Cube was a trick? Peng Shiren frowned, and was about to take out the Rubik's Cube to take a closer look. But at that moment, he suddenly felt a great sense of oppression descend on him from behind. Turning his head, Peng Shiren's gaze met Wang Ling's dead fish eyes a light year away. Peng Shiren couldn't help swearing on the spot. F***K. He can even chase me like this? Although he was utterly shocked by Wang Ling's pursuit, Peng Shiren felt a lot more at ease at this moment. Judging from the other party's relentless pursuit, there shouldn't be any problem with the Rubik's Cube. Otherwise, why would it be chasing him so nervously? What a troublesome guy. Peng Shiren grit his teeth and sped up again. At the moment, he was roughly a light year away from Wang Ling. At that moment, Wang Ling's hand was also condensing starlight, inspired by Peng Shiren's galaxy fist. Zhenren, you want to? The monk was stupefied as he could roughly guess what Wang Ling wanted to do. Right now, Wang Ling was using starlight to condense a large blade that was about a light year long. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.